Hello everyone, I am Mr. Midnight. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. And if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, now let's get comfortable, relax, and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. On a chilly March evening in 2025, the quiet suburban town of Naperville, Illinois, known for its tree-lined streets, family-oriented neighborhoods, and highly ranked schools, became the setting for a crime that would shock the entire Midwest. What began as a seemingly ordinary day for one local family escalated into a night of terror that would leave a community reeling, expose gaps in criminal oversight, and ignite debates about safety, mental health, and the vulnerabilities hidden in otherwise peaceful towns. This is the story of the Whitman family, a story of ambition, love, and ordinary life violently disrupted. And it is a story that would reveal the darkest sides of obsession and entitlement in modern society. It is also a cautionary tale, illustrating how quickly the lives of innocents can be thrown into chaos when a predator operates without accountability or detection. The Whitman family had long been respected in Naperville for their contributions to the local community. Michael Whitman, 46, worked as a civil engineer at a major infrastructure firm and had a reputation for precision, integrity, and mentorship. Born in 1978 in Joliet, Illinois, he had grown up in a disciplined household, the eldest of 3 siblings, his father a retired firefighter and his mother a nurse. Michael had always been drawn to problem-solving and construction, earning a degree in civil engineering from the University of Illinois and rising steadily in his career. He married Claire Whitman, 42, in 2003. Claire, born in 1982 in Evanston, Illinois, was a dedicated pediatrician, admired by colleagues for her compassion, patience, and commitment to children's health. Together, Michael and Claire built a household characterized by stability, love, and ambition. The Whitmans' 2 children were the pride of their lives. Emma, 15, born in 2009, was a high-achieving student and active participant in local youth theater programs. She had recently auditioned for a statewide competition in the performing arts, and her parents were immensely proud of her talent and discipline. Liam, 12, born in 2012, was a budding athlete, excelling in soccer and baseball, known for his competitive spirit and kindness toward peers. The family's home on Briarwood Lane, a spacious 2-story house with a well-manicured lawn, reflected their careful attention to both aesthetics and safety. Neighbors described the Whitmans as approachable, engaged in school activities, volunteer initiatives, and neighborhood watch programs. Their lives, while busy and structured, seemed impervious to danger, until one March evening when everything changed. The threat came in the form of a man named Brandon Keene, 28, a former acquaintance of Michael's younger brother, who had drifted into a series of criminal behaviors over the years. Born in 1997 in Oak Brook, Illinois, Brandon had a history of minor theft, drug use, and increasingly erratic behavior, but he had avoided serious convictions until recently. He was charismatic in casual social settings, but those who knew him more closely recognized a pattern of entitlement, manipulation, and disregard for boundaries. Over time, Brandon became obsessed with the Whitman family, particularly Claire, fixating on perceived slights and imagined connections that fueled his delusional sense of entitlement. His behavior escalated from social media messages to trespassing near the Whitman home, all of which went largely unreported due to a combination of fear, disbelief, and the assumption that he posed no serious threat. On March 17, 2025, Brandon enacted a plan that he had spent months formulating. He approached the Whitman residence under the pretense of delivering a package, exploiting a trust built through a casual acquaintance with Michael's extended family. As evening fell, he entered the home unnoticed, taking advantage of unlocked doors and routine behaviors the family had practiced for years. He carried with him a backpack containing restraints, a small firearm, and implements designed to intimidate and control. Brandon's goal was calculated: to terrorize, assert dominance, and demand compliance from the family, believing that he could manipulate the situation to his advantage without immediate consequence. His intrusion was sudden, silent, and methodical, a stark reminder that preparation and obsession can transform ordinary objects and routines into instruments of terror. Inside the Whitman home, Emma was completing her homework in the study while Liam practiced soccer drills in the basement using a soft ball. Claire was preparing dinner, and Michael was reviewing engineering plans in the living room. Brandon moved swiftly, seizing Liam first as he emerged from the basement to retrieve a water bottle. He forced the boy into a corner, restraining him with cord from his backpack. Hearing the commotion, Emma ran toward the stairs, only to encounter Brandon's imposing figure. He silenced her with a hand over her mouth, binding her wrists with zip ties taken from his bag. Claire rushed to her children's aid, attempting to reason with Brandon, but he forced her to the floor, restraining her as well and warning that any attempt to call the police would have immediate consequences. Michael, returning from the garage with groceries, was confronted directly by Brandon, who brandished his firearm and demanded total compliance. The confrontation quickly escalated into physical struggle, with Michael trying to subdue Brandon while ensuring the safety of his family, but he was overpowered and restrained alongside his wife and children. As the night progressed, the Whitman family found themselves trapped in a scenario that seemed to stretch time itself, every moment filled with fear, uncertainty, and the looming threat of violence. Brandon Keene had planned his intrusion with unnerving precision, moving through the house with a sense of purpose that betrayed weeks of observation. He separated the family, forcing Michael into the study while binding Claire in the kitchen, and placing the children in the basement under constant watch. He demanded passwords, access to bank accounts, and information about valuables in the home, all while alternating between calm, threatening speech and sudden bursts of aggression designed to destabilize and terrify his captives. The family, though terrified, attempted to communicate silently, signaling plans to each other with subtle gestures and shared glances, hoping that even under duress, they might find an opportunity to regain control. While the immediate threat unfolded inside the home, neighbors began noticing unusual activity. Lights in the Whitman house flickered sporadically, and Brandon had inadvertently tripped the motion sensor in the garage, prompting one vigilant neighbor, Thomas Reed, to call local authorities. Thomas had seen the family at community events and knew the Whitmans were generally cautious and conscientious. The sudden erratic behavior of lights and garage doors triggered his concern. As police dispatched units to Briarwood Lane, Brandon became increasingly agitated, sensing the possibility that the intrusion might be interrupted. He paced the hallways, gesturing menacingly with the firearm, warning the family not to make any noise, while his mind raced through contingency plans he had developed over months of obsession. The tension in the home was nearly unbearable, punctuated by sudden silences, whispered threats, and the soft sounds of the children attempting to remain calm under terrifying circumstances. Investigators would later piece together a chilling timeline of Brandon's preparation and movement. Security camera footage from neighboring houses and traffic cameras captured him circling the block repeatedly, observing the family's routines and entry points. His backpack, meticulously packed, contained not only restraints and a firearm, but also duct tape, gloves, and a small butane torch, tools intended to enforce compliance and escalate fear. Forensic analysis of his digital activity revealed searches for how to restrain people safely, getting past home alarms, and avoiding police detection, indicating a level of premeditation that would weigh heavily in court. Text messages sent to a former friend in the days prior revealed his fixation on Claire, the desire to teach the family a lesson, and his insistence that no one could stop him, providing prosecutors with direct evidence of his intent and obsession. Inside the Whitman home, the family's ordeal continued for hours. Brandon's behavior oscillated unpredictably. At times he spoke of leaving peacefully if demands were met. At other times, he threatened severe harm should anyone attempt resistance. Michael attempted subtle maneuvers to free his family, testing the strength of knots and cords while feigning compliance. Claire comforted the children, whispering reassurance while suppressing her own rising panic. Emma, though only 15, showed remarkable composure, helping Liam understand how to stay still and silent while observing Brandon's routines, noting where he left his firearm or momentarily turned his back. Every small observation mattered, as they hoped to exploit the first opportunity for escape or intervention. Meanwhile, outside, Naperville police were coordinating a tactical response. The dispatcher had relayed the initial call to multiple units, and officers arrived in stages, surveying the property and confirming the situation with neighbors. Officer Rachel Martinez, a seasoned crisis negotiator, assumed communication with Brandon via phone and voice calls. Initial attempts at dialogue were met with hostility and deflection, Brandon's paranoia and delusional justifications fueling a volatile dynamic. He insisted he was teaching them a lesson, and that the police would never understand his reasoning, reflecting both his obsession with Claire and his detachment from reality. Negotiators patiently engaged, seeking to de-escalate the situation and gain insight into Brandon's state of mind, all while preparing tactical teams for entry should the threat escalate to violence. The situation reached its critical juncture around midnight. Brandon, increasingly agitated and aware of police presence, began pacing, shouting threats at the family and demanding compliance. The children were trembling. Claire was attempting to soothe them, and Michael recognized that any misstep could result in immediate harm. Officer Martinez, having established limited communication, began probing for vulnerabilities, asking Brandon to release one family member as a gesture of goodwill and offering assurances regarding negotiation outcomes. After tense minutes that felt like hours, Brandon relented, allowing Liam to step outside under police guidance, where he was immediately secured and provided with medical attention and psychological support. Liam's release was pivotal, offering negotiators additional leverage and giving Brandon a measure of relief in seeing that his captives were reacting in ways he could still manipulate, though his control was beginning to slip. The remaining family members remained inside under Brandon's watch, but his composure was unraveling. Surveillance drones and tactical cameras provided law enforcement with a clear view of Brandon's movements and positioning within the home. Negotiators emphasized that surrendering peacefully would prevent harm and highlighted the certainty of legal consequences. Brandon's earlier meticulous planning began to falter under sustained pressure, uncertainty about police strategy, and the growing presence of law enforcement personnel eroding his confidence. Small tactical windows opened for potential intervention, but authorities remained cautious, aware that any miscalculation could result in immediate escalation and injury. The Whitmans continued their quiet, strategic compliance, using knowledge of Brandon's routines and past patterns to maintain composure and avoid provoking sudden violence. This part of the night would ultimately be critical in preventing tragedy. Tactical teams observed Brandon moving between rooms, occasionally shouting at the family, while negotiators maintained dialogue designed to prolong the situation and buy time. Evidence gathered from digital footprints, neighbor reports, and Brandon's communications would later demonstrate an extensive premeditated plan, showing he had studied not only the family's routines, but also the timing of neighborhood police patrols, the response time of emergency services, and even weather conditions that might affect police visibility. This degree of planning underscored the calculated and dangerous nature of his intrusion, transforming what might have seemed like a spontaneous domestic crime into a case study in premeditation and obsessive criminal behavior. As the early hours of the morning approached, the tension inside the Whitman home reached a crescendo. Brandon Keene, increasingly aware that law enforcement was coordinating a tactical response outside, became erratic, oscillating between moments of cruel calm and sudden bursts of aggression. He forced Michael to retrieve valuables from the safe, demanded Claire's phone passwords, and continuously monitored the children, using threats and intimidation to maintain control. Every small sound, the creak of floorboards, a sigh from a restrained family member, made him snap, shouting obscenities and brandishing his firearm to assert dominance. For the Whitmans, the hours felt endless. Claire whispered to Emma and Liam, reminding them to stay quiet, to watch Brandon's patterns, and to remember every detail that could help them survive or assist authorities. Michael, though physically restrained, tried to subtly free himself, loosening knots and evaluating weak points in Brandon's makeshift security. Every movement had to be calculated. A single misstep could result in immediate, irreversible harm. Outside, the Naperville Police Department was working on multiple fronts. Negotiators maintained a tenuous line of communication with Brandon, speaking in calm, deliberate tones, while tactical units positioned themselves discreetly around the property. Officers reviewed floor plans, observed security camera feeds, and coordinated with SWAT teams prepared for forced entry if necessary. Officer Rachel Martinez, leading the negotiation, emphasized patience and the careful buildup of rapport, recognizing that Brandon's increasing agitation made any hasty action potentially lethal. Meanwhile, additional officers canvassed the neighborhood, ensuring that curious residents remained at a safe distance and that no inadvertent distractions would compromise the delicate operation. Dispatchers relayed real-time updates to commanding officers, providing a comprehensive view of both Brandon's movements inside the home and the family's condition, information that would prove crucial in the hours to come. Inside, Brandon's delusions and obsession with Claire became more apparent. He spoke repeatedly about perceived slights from the past, claiming that the Whitmans owed him respect and recognition he believed was denied. His fixation intensified, and his actions grew more dangerous. He retrieved the firearm multiple times, waving it to maintain fear, and at one point threatened to harm Claire if his demands were not met. Michael and Claire exchanged subtle glances, silently assessing the environment, counting movements, and anticipating opportunities for distraction or escape. Emma and Liam, though frightened, demonstrated remarkable composure, following their parents' guidance to remain still, memorize details, and communicate non-verbally whenever possible. Their collective calm and strategic behavior played a critical role in ensuring that Brandon did not escalate to lethal action during the early hours. Around 3:15 a.m., a critical breakthrough occurred. Negotiators, having established limited trust through prior conversations, proposed a compromise. Brandon could surrender peacefully if he released Claire, who was identified as the primary target of his obsession. Reluctantly, Brandon agreed, allowing her to step outside under police supervision. Once Claire was in view of officers, she was immediately secured, provided with medical attention, and separated from Brandon to prevent impulsive retaliation. Her release allowed negotiators to reinforce the reality of consequences while continuing to calm Brandon, emphasizing the inevitability of arrest if compliance was not maintained. This moment was pivotal. It demonstrated that patience, structured negotiation, and strategic de-escalation could begin to resolve a situation that had the potential for extreme violence. With Claire safely outside, Brandon became increasingly isolated. His delusions conflicted with the visible presence of law enforcement. Tactical teams used real-time surveillance to track his movements inside the home, noting his agitation and inconsistencies in attention to the restrained children and Michael. Negotiators continued dialogue, reinforcing the promise of safe surrender and emphasizing the certainty of legal consequences, while also appealing to any sense of self-preservation Brandon might possess. His obsession with control began to waver as he realized that his actions were no longer invisible, and that the carefully constructed illusion of dominance was collapsing under the pressure of coordinated law enforcement. Shortly after 4:00 a.m., the opportunity for resolution presented itself. Michael, recognizing a moment when Brandon turned his attention away briefly, managed to subtly free himself from part of his restraint, creating a small but crucial distraction. Coordinating with his children's movements and observing Brandon's path, Michael created a limited opening that allowed him to call out to negotiators using a prearranged phrase established earlier through limited communication. This alert provided tactical teams with confirmation that the remaining hostages were capable of signaling, without provoking immediate violence. The combination of Michael's subtle maneuver, Brandon's increasing instability, and the sustained negotiation created a narrow window for safe extraction. Police executed a carefully choreographed intervention shortly thereafter. SWAT officers, armed and armored, entered the property using alternative access points previously scouted via cameras and intelligence gathered from neighbor observations. The operation prioritized speed and control to prevent Brandon from harming the remaining family members. Brandon, confronted with multiple officers simultaneously, initially attempted to resist but quickly realized that his escape and dominance were impossible. Tactical officers restrained him, disarming and securing him without injury to the Whitmans. Michael, Emma, and Liam were quickly released, medically assessed, and provided immediate support. The successful intervention highlighted the importance of preparation, patience, and coordination between negotiation teams and tactical units, preventing what could have otherwise escalated into a fatal outcome. In the aftermath of the standoff, authorities secured the Whitman home as a crime scene. Forensic teams began analyzing evidence, documenting the layout, collecting the firearm, restraints, and other implements used by Brandon, and reviewing surveillance footage from both inside and outside the home. Police also recovered Brandon's digital devices, which contained a trove of information about his planning, including notes on the family's routines, prior communication attempts, and evidence of his obsession with Claire. Investigators later confirmed that he had conducted detailed reconnaissance over weeks, identifying weak points in home security, observing patterns of behavior, and even researching tactical responses by law enforcement in similar hostage situations. This evidence would later play a central role in demonstrating the premeditated and obsessive nature of his actions in court. The immediate response by Naperville police, the skill of the negotiators, and the composure of the Whitman family collectively prevented tragedy. Emergency services provided medical and psychological support, ensuring the family could begin the process of recovery. Neighbors, initially shaken by the events, came together to provide assistance, meals, and reassurance, demonstrating the power of community support in the aftermath of traumatic events. The case became a focal point for local and national media, with journalists emphasizing both the danger posed by obsessive individuals and the effectiveness of coordinated law enforcement response in resolving high-risk domestic situations. In the weeks following the incident, the Whitman family began the long and arduous process of recovery, both physically and psychologically. Though no one had suffered life-threatening injuries, the emotional and mental scars were profound. Emma and Liam experienced nightmares, heightened anxiety, and fear of returning to the home where their ordeal had taken place. Claire grappled with post-traumatic stress, replaying the events repeatedly in her mind, questioning what might have happened had any element of her family's response failed. Michael, who had assumed the role of protector during the standoff, struggled with guilt despite his efforts having saved his family. Recognizing the need for structured support, the Whitmans engaged with mental health professionals who specialized in trauma and crisis recovery, participating in both individual therapy and family sessions designed to process the shared experience and rebuild a sense of safety. As part of their healing, the family took practical steps to enhance their security and create a controlled environment where they could regain confidence. Their home was retrofitted with reinforced doors, biometric locks, and a state-of-the-art surveillance system covering all access points. Digital security measures were strengthened, including encrypted communication and restricted access to social media to prevent unwanted contact or monitoring by outsiders. Beyond physical measures, they developed detailed safety plans, practiced emergency protocols, and educated their children on situational awareness without instilling undue fear. Over time, these steps provided both psychological reassurance and tangible protection, allowing the family to gradually reclaim a sense of normalcy. The broader community responded to the Whitman incident with a mixture of shock, sympathy, and proactive engagement. Neighbors organized workshops on home safety, self-defense, and recognizing the early signs of obsessive behavior. Local schools incorporated lessons on personal safety and awareness into their curricula, emphasizing the importance of communication, trust, and reporting concerns. The Naperville Police Department used the case as a training example, reviewing the negotiation, tactical response, and coordination between units, highlighting lessons in patience, risk assessment, and the importance of intelligence gathering. These initiatives reinforce that individual safety is closely tied to community awareness and preparedness, and that the lessons of one family's ordeal could prevent harm to others. The legal proceedings against Brandon Keene moved swiftly. Prosecutors presented a comprehensive case documenting premeditation, the obsessive nature of the crime, and the threats to the Whitman family's lives. Evidence included surveillance footage, neighbor statements, forensic analysis of the crime scene, and Brandon's own communications detailing his planning and intent. Psychological evaluations revealed a pattern of escalating obsession, entitlement, and disregard for the well-being of others, reinforcing the argument that he posed a high risk of continued violent behavior. His defense team attempted to argue diminished responsibility, citing mental health issues, but the overwhelming evidence of careful planning and deliberate action undermined this claim. In July 2025, after months of hearings, testimony, and deliberation, the court reached a verdict. Brandon Keene was found guilty on multiple counts, including kidnapping, unlawful restraint, armed assault, and burglary with intent to terrorize. The severity of his crimes, combined with the premeditated nature and psychological harm inflicted, led to a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The judge emphasized that the sentence was not only punitive, but also necessary to protect society from a calculated and dangerous individual, sending a clear message regarding the seriousness of obsessive, violent intrusions into private lives. The ruling brought a measure of closure to the Whitman family, though the emotional and psychological work of recovery continued long after the gavel fell. In the months and years following the trial, the Whitmans channeled their experience into advocacy and public education. Claire collaborated with local health organizations to highlight the psychological impact of domestic intrusion, while Michael worked with community groups to improve safety awareness, emergency preparedness, and neighborhood coordination. Emma and Liam, guided by their parents and counselors, shared their experiences in age-appropriate ways, emphasizing resilience, communication, and empowerment to other children who might face similar threats. Their story became a reference point in workshops, community meetings, and media discussions, illustrating both the dangers of obsessive criminal behavior and the importance of measured, coordinated responses by families, neighbors, and law enforcement. The Whitman case also influenced policy discussions and professional practice. Naperville and surrounding municipalities reviewed ordinances related to stalking, harassment, and domestic threats, implementing measures to improve early reporting, risk assessment, and coordination among police, mental health professionals, and community organizations. Social media platforms were encouraged to develop more effective tools to detect and respond to obsessive or threatening behavior, and mental health advocates used the case to highlight the importance of early intervention and support for individuals exhibiting patterns of escalating obsession. Academic and professional journals referenced the case in discussions of threat assessment, crisis negotiation, and the psychology of obsessive offenders, using it as an example of both danger and prevention. Over time, the Whitmans rebuilt their lives, integrating the lessons learned into everyday routines. Their home became a sanctuary equipped with both physical security and emotional safety practices. They returned to work, school, and community engagement with heightened awareness and resilience. The family's story served as a testament to human courage, resourcefulness, and the power of preparation and collaboration in the face of danger. While the memory of Brandon Keene's intrusion would never fully fade, it catalyzed personal growth, community action, and systemic improvements that extended far beyond Briarwood Lane. By 2030, the Whitmans were recognized not only for surviving a terrifying ordeal, but also for transforming it into a force for education and prevention. Their advocacy, combined with policy reforms and law enforcement training improvements, had contributed to safer communities, heightened awareness of the signs of obsessive and dangerous behavior, and more robust frameworks for responding to domestic threats. The children had matured into thoughtful, resilient adolescents, embodying the lessons of vigilance, empathy, and courage instilled during and after the incident. Michael and Claire continued to honor the experience through community involvement, always emphasizing that preparation, calm, and communication could prevent ordinary life from descending into tragedy. Ultimately, the Whitman case exemplifies the intersection of obsession, premeditation, and domestic intrusion in modern suburban life. It demonstrates that even in communities perceived as safe, the risk posed by calculated, obsessive individuals is real and requires vigilance, proactive measures, and coordinated intervention. The story also illustrates the resilience of the human spirit and the ability of individuals and families to recover, rebuild, and transform trauma into advocacy, awareness, and systemic improvement. While the events of that March night in 2025 left a permanent imprint, the Whitmans' response and continued engagement ensured that their ordeal became a catalyst for protection, education, and vigilance, benefiting countless others who might otherwise face similar dangers. Story 2. On a brisk November evening in 2025, the affluent suburban town of Highland Park, Illinois, was rocked by a crime that would haunt the community and dominate headlines for months. Known for its stately homes, quiet streets, and top-ranked schools, Highland Park seemed an unlikely setting for a violent intrusion. But what began as a seemingly ordinary family evening would escalate into a harrowing ordeal that exposed chilling realities about obsession, entitlement, and the vulnerabilities even in the most secure neighborhoods. The victims, the Carver family, appeared to lead a life many would envy: successful careers, well-adjusted children, and active involvement in the community. But their ordinary routines were about to intersect with a calculated criminal mind. This is the story of the Carvers, a story of terror, resilience, and survival, and a case that would raise critical questions about domestic security, the detection of escalating threats, and the nature of premeditated violence in the modern suburban landscape. The Carvers had long been respected pillars of Highland Park. Jonathan Carver, 48, was an executive at a financial technology firm based in Chicago, known for his meticulous attention to detail and philanthropic efforts. Born in 1977 in Oak Brook, Illinois, Jonathan grew up in a disciplined household as the youngest of 4 siblings. His father was a corporate attorney and his mother a high school principal, instilling in him values of responsibility, persistence, and education. After attending Northwestern University and earning a degree in finance, Jonathan quickly climbed the corporate ladder, earning both wealth and respect. He married Alexandra "Alex" Carver, 45, in 2002. Alex, born in 1980 in Evanston, Illinois, was a pediatric neurologist whose reputation for compassion and advocacy extended beyond her patients to the broader medical community. Together, Jonathan and Alex had built a home defined by stability, structure, and care, one that many in Highland Park admired for its elegance and warmth. The Carvers' 2 children, Ethan and Sophia, were central to their lives. Ethan, 16, was a talented athlete, excelling in lacrosse and track, and had recently earned a leadership role on his school's student council. Sophia, 13, was a gifted artist, known for her creativity, meticulous nature, and involvement in local youth programs. The family maintained close friendships within their neighborhood and participated actively in local school and charity events. Their home on Maplewood Drive, a sprawling 2-story residence with an alarmed entry system and an elaborate backyard, reflected the care and attention they invested in both security and comfort. Yet the very routines that made their life predictable and harmonious also made them targets for someone who had been observing them closely. The threat emerged in the form of a man named Marcus Ellington, 30, a former acquaintance of Jonathan from a college networking group. Marcus, born in 1995 in Chicago, had a documented history of escalating criminal behavior, starting with minor thefts and progressing to fraud and harassment. Despite brief periods of probation and rehabilitation, Marcus's behavior remained erratic and obsessive, often fixating on perceived slights or unmet expectations from those he believed had wronged him. Over the preceding months, he had become increasingly fixated on the Carvers, particularly Alex, for reasons that appeared rooted in jealousy, delusion, and entitlement. He monitored their social media, noted their schedules, and even followed them during outings, all while presenting an outwardly calm and approachable demeanor in professional settings. On the evening of November 14th, Marcus executed a plan he had been carefully crafting for weeks. He approached the Carver residence under the guise of delivering a package, taking advantage of Jonathan's predictable schedule, the presence of delivery routines, and the fact that he was known to the family from occasional social interactions years earlier. Once inside, he quickly revealed the weapons and restraints he had concealed, moving methodically to isolate family members and establish control. Jonathan, returning from a brief meeting, was the first to encounter Marcus, who forced him into the living room and restrained him with zip ties and cord from his backpack. Meanwhile, Alex, attending to dinner preparations, was coerced into the kitchen and similarly restrained. Ethan and Sophia, completing homework and extracurricular practice in separate rooms, were quickly overpowered and bound, their protests silenced by both fear and Marcus's calculated threats. Marcus's intrusion was meticulously planned to maximize control while minimizing his exposure. He moved through the house, demanding access to financial accounts, passwords, and valuables, alternating between moments of calm conversation and sudden bursts of intimidation designed to unnerve the family. He threatened that any attempt to alert the authorities would result in immediate harm, and he continually referenced imagined grievances, blurring the line between personal obsession and the pretense of logical rationale. The Carvers, while terrified, attempted subtle communication, signaling intentions and potential escape strategies without provoking Marcus's attention. Every second was filled with psychological tension, as Marcus's presence transformed ordinary rooms into instruments of control and fear. Meanwhile, outside, neighbors had begun noticing unusual activity. Lights flickered inconsistently, and movement in the yard that did not match routine behavior triggered concern from nearby residents. One neighbor, Sarah Donovan, called local authorities after observing Marcus entering and exiting the property multiple times earlier in the evening, under the pretense of package delivery. Police dispatched units quickly, but Marcus's planning included tactics designed to delay intervention, including disabling visible cameras and maintaining constant surveillance of entry points. Negotiators were alerted, and a strategic response plan began to take shape, involving crisis negotiation, tactical positioning, and real-time observation to prevent escalation into physical harm. Inside, the Carvers remained bound but vigilant. Jonathan subtly tested the restraints and memorized Marcus's movement patterns, while Alex comforted the children, guiding them to remain calm and silent. Ethan, despite his age, demonstrated remarkable composure, observing and noting Marcus's behavioral patterns, while Sophia used her creative problem-solving skills to identify potential escape routes. Every small detail mattered. The location of the weapon, the positioning of cords and zippers, the timing of Marcus's attention shifts, all became critical information that could be leveraged to survive and signal authorities. Time stretched slowly as Marcus's mental state oscillated between obsession, aggression, and erratic calculation, creating a volatile environment in which a single misstep could trigger violence. Negotiators, having established initial contact through calls and limited conversation, began probing Marcus for vulnerabilities. They attempted to appeal to logic and self-preservation, emphasizing peaceful surrender while repeatedly reinforcing the inevitability of arrest. Marcus, entrenched in delusions and obsessed with control, initially resisted, alternately threatening the family and bargaining for perceived concessions. Tactical units positioned themselves around the property, observing entry points and preparing for forced intervention if necessary, balancing urgency with caution to avoid precipitating harm. Outside the home, a network of police, medics, and crisis response professionals collaborated to monitor Marcus's behavior and ensure that all actions taken would protect the Carvers while maintaining leverage over the intruder. As the night wore on, the tension inside the Carver residence became almost unbearable. Marcus Ellington, increasingly aware of the presence of law enforcement outside, became erratic and unpredictable. He paced the hallways, occasionally shouting threats, demanding passwords, access to online accounts, and large sums of money, claiming that if the Carvers cooperated fully, no one would be harmed. Despite his verbal claims, his obsessive fixation on Alex became more pronounced, as he questioned perceived slights from years past, and insisted that the family owed him respect for imagined offenses. Jonathan, aware that any sudden movement could provoke violence, continued to subtly test his restraints, looking for a weak knot or cord that could provide even a slight advantage should an opportunity for escape present itself. Alex remained calm under pressure, whispering instructions to Ethan and Sophia, guiding them to observe Marcus's behavior without attracting his attention, and keeping their collective composure as the hours stretched interminably. Outside, Naperville and Highland Park police coordinated a complex tactical operation. Officers mapped the Carver home, identified multiple access points, and positioned SWAT teams discreetly while negotiators worked to maintain a dialogue with Marcus. Officer Rachel Martinez, a crisis negotiation specialist, assumed responsibility for verbal communication, attempting to de-escalate Marcus's aggression and build a fragile rapport. Negotiators encouraged Marcus to release one family member as a gesture of good faith, appealing to his sense of self-preservation and reinforcing that surrender would result in the least severe consequences. Marcus vacillated, sometimes threatening violence and other times expressing confusion, revealing the extent to which his delusional fixation and premeditation had been driving his actions. The first breakthrough came around 1:30 a.m. when Marcus, frustrated and increasingly agitated by the presence of law enforcement, allowed Ethan to step outside under police supervision. Ethan's release not only provided a momentary reprieve for him, but also allowed officers to confirm the well-being of the remaining family members. Ethan was quickly taken to a safe location, assessed for physical and psychological trauma, and interviewed to gain critical insights into Marcus's patterns of movement and behavior inside the house. This intelligence became invaluable to the tactical teams planning a coordinated entry, providing real-time information on Marcus's mental state, location, and the potential risks to Jonathan, Alex, and Sophia. Inside the home, Marcus's behavior became progressively erratic. He alternated between obsessive ranting about perceived grievances, demanding valuables and information, and bursts of violence that threatened both safety and sanity. Jonathan continued to monitor Marcus's patterns, noting moments when he turned his back or became distracted, while Alex reassured Sophia that they must remain patient and observe, emphasizing the importance of timing and control. Every minor observation became vital, from the placement of the firearm to Marcus's response to sound and movement, as the family silently crafted a plan to exploit his lapses in attention and ensure their survival. Negotiators worked tirelessly, keeping Marcus engaged with repeated conversations, appeals to reason, and a careful balancing of threats and reassurances. They emphasized the certainty of legal consequences, the impossibility of escape, and the potential for reduced sentences if surrender occurred peacefully. Marcus, however, oscillated between compliance and aggression, making the situation increasingly dangerous and unpredictable. Tactical teams, meanwhile, continued surveillance from multiple angles, documenting entrances, exits, and the interior layout, ready to intervene at the precise moment that maximized the safety of the hostages. Around 3:15 a.m., a critical opportunity emerged. Marcus, frustrated by the continued presence of law enforcement and the release of Ethan, turned his attention briefly to other rooms, inadvertently allowing Jonathan to subtly free one hand from his restraints. Using this moment, he quietly signaled to Alex and Sophia, who began moving imperceptibly to create a minor distraction, drawing Marcus's focus just long enough to allow tactical teams to finalize their breach plan. Negotiators continued speaking to Marcus, keeping him engaged and unaware that a tactical intervention was imminent, leveraging his obsessive focus on maintaining control to buy precious time. At approximately 3:45 a.m., SWAT teams executed a meticulously planned entry. Officers approached multiple access points simultaneously, using both visible and concealed entry routes while armed and armored to contain and neutralize the threat. Marcus, caught off guard by the coordinated movement of law enforcement and confronted with multiple officers simultaneously, initially attempted to resist but quickly realized he was overpowered. Tactical teams restrained him without injury to the hostages, disarming him and securing the perimeter to prevent escape or further violence. Jonathan, Alex, and Sophia were immediately freed, medically assessed, and provided with emergency psychological support. Their composure and silent observation during the ordeal had contributed significantly to the successful outcome. Following the intervention, the Carver home was treated as a comprehensive crime scene. Forensic teams collected evidence of Marcus's planning, including the firearm, restraints, notes, and digital devices that documented weeks of surveillance, social media monitoring, and obsessive research into the family's routines. Police also recovered his backpack, which contained additional implements intended to control and intimidate, further illustrating the premeditated nature of the intrusion. Neighbors and community members provided statements about unusual activity observed in the days prior, all contributing to a robust evidentiary record, establishing both intent and forethought. The Carvers were provided ongoing care in the days following the incident. Ethan, despite the trauma of being restrained and threatened, showed remarkable resilience, while Sophia, who had been tightly bound and in close proximity to Marcus during moments of agitation, began working with therapists to process her fear and develop coping strategies. Alex and Jonathan engaged in extensive counseling, individually and as a couple, addressing both the immediate trauma and the long-term implications of the invasion. Community support played a critical role, as neighbors organized assistance, delivered meals, and provided reassurance, demonstrating that collective vigilance and compassion could mitigate some of the psychological impacts of such a harrowing event. Legal proceedings against Marcus Ellington moved quickly due to the overwhelming evidence collected during and after the incident. Prosecutors presented detailed documentation of premeditation, obsession, and intentional terror inflicted upon the family. Security footage, forensic evidence, and Marcus's own digital communications established both the obsessive nature of his actions and the high level of planning involved. Psychological evaluations confirmed a pattern of escalating delusional fixation and entitlement, reinforcing the argument that Marcus posed a continuing threat to society and required a custodial sentence that reflected both the severity and premeditation of his crimes. Defense attorneys attempted to argue diminished capacity, citing mental health issues, but the combination of evidence, planning, and calculated behavior undermined any claims that Marcus was unaware of his actions or their consequences. As the investigation into Marcus Ellington's attack on the Carvers unfolded, the full scope of his planning and obsession became chillingly clear. Police and forensic analysts discovered that his intrusion was not spontaneous. Every detail had been meticulously calculated. Digital evidence revealed weeks of surveillance. Marcus had monitored the family's movements via social media, noted when Jonathan would leave the house for work, and studied the children's extracurricular schedules. He had even timed deliveries and service visits to predict when access to the home would be easiest. His backpack contained detailed notes on escape routes, threats to employ in case of resistance, and lists of valuables he intended to seize. The depth of premeditation shocked investigators and prosecutors alike, confirming that this was not a simple home invasion, but a carefully orchestrated attempt to control, intimidate, and terrorize a single family. Public attention intensified as the story spread. Local and national media outlets reported on the events, highlighting the terror faced by the Carvers and the remarkable coordination of law enforcement that had prevented a potential tragedy. The narrative emphasized both the danger of obsessive criminal behavior and the effectiveness of patient negotiation, paired with tactical intervention. Analysts dissected Marcus's psychological profile, describing a pattern of escalating obsession, entitlement, and disregard for social boundaries, noting that his fixation on Alex Carver had driven his meticulous preparation and bold execution. Experts in criminal psychology remarked that such individuals often exhibit a dangerous combination of calculation, delusional belief systems, and selective aggression, creating highly volatile situations in otherwise safe communities. As the Carvers began processing their ordeal, they faced the dual challenge of personal recovery and participation in the legal proceedings. Jonathan and Alex, while traumatized, made a conscious decision to be actively involved in the case, understanding that their testimony and cooperation would be crucial in ensuring justice. Ethan and Sophia, supported by mental health professionals, began learning to articulate their experiences, providing detailed accounts of Marcus's behavior, his threats, and the strategies they had employed to survive. Their testimony, though emotionally taxing, became a critical component of the prosecutorial case, illustrating not only the terror inflicted, but also the premeditation and obsessive intent behind Marcus's actions. In court, prosecutors presented a compelling narrative supported by forensic evidence, surveillance footage, and digital records. They emphasized Marcus's prior criminal history, noting a pattern of escalating offenses including harassment, stalking, and theft. Testimony from neighbors corroborated the weeks of observed surveillance, establishing that Marcus's obsession had been ongoing and deliberate. Security footage from inside the Carver home, combined with tactical team recordings, provided a minute-by-minute account of the night's events, highlighting Marcus's erratic behavior, threats, and movements, as well as the family's resilience and quick thinking under duress. Experts in criminal behavior detailed the psychological profile of Marcus, outlining the warning signs that, in hindsight, had been present long before the incident. The defense attempted to argue diminished capacity and mental instability, claiming that Marcus's behavior was influenced by a psychological disorder that impaired his judgment. They presented psychiatric evaluations, suggesting he had struggled with delusional thought patterns and obsessive tendencies for years. However, prosecutors countered with overwhelming evidence of deliberate planning and calculated control. Marcus's consistent focus on the Carvers, his repeated observations, and the extensive preparations demonstrated an awareness of right and wrong, undermining the diminished capacity argument. Witness testimony from law enforcement officers, crisis negotiators, and forensic specialists further reinforced that Marcus was fully cognizant of his actions, fully aware of the danger he posed, and capable of understanding the legal consequences of his behavior. Throughout the trial, the community followed closely. Highland Park residents, still shaken by the intrusion, attended proceedings and engaged with local advocacy groups focused on domestic safety, obsessive behavior prevention, and mental health awareness. Media outlets reported on the family's courage and composure, highlighting the Carvers as a model of resilience in the face of extreme adversity. Experts emphasized that their ability to remain calm, observe, and communicate subtly had likely prevented physical harm, underscoring the importance of education and preparation in high-risk domestic situations. On the fifth day of the trial, prosecutors introduced a critical piece of evidence: Marcus's digital device logs detailing his obsessive surveillance of Alex Carver. These logs included timestamps, photos, and notes outlining perceived grievances and detailed strategies for controlling the family. The jury was presented with the methodical and deliberate nature of the planning, illustrating that Marcus's intrusion was a targeted act of obsession, not a random act of violence. Witnesses confirmed that he had researched tactical responses to similar domestic situations and had prepared contingency plans to maintain control if confronted by law enforcement. The evidence painted a chilling portrait of a man whose delusions and entitlement had manifested into a violent, premeditated attack. During closing arguments, prosecutors emphasized the calculated cruelty of Marcus's actions and the extraordinary resilience of the Carver family. They detailed the hours of terror endured, the premeditated surveillance, and the psychological impact on the children and parents alike. Defense attorneys reiterated claims of diminished capacity, highlighting Marcus's psychological history and prior interventions. Yet the balance of evidence overwhelmingly favored the prosecution, presenting a narrative of deliberate, obsessive, and highly dangerous behavior that required significant custodial intervention. By the end of November 2025, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Marcus Ellington was found guilty on multiple counts, including aggravated kidnapping, unlawful restraint, aggravated assault with a firearm, and burglary with intent to terrorize. The judge, in his sentencing, emphasized the premeditated nature of the crime, the obsessive and dangerous mental state of the offender, and the profound impact on the victims. Marcus was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, reflecting both the severity of his crimes and the high risk he posed to society. In delivering the sentence, the judge acknowledged the Carvers' extraordinary composure and resilience, noting that their courage had directly contributed to the survival of the family. In the months and years following the trial, the Carver family worked diligently to rebuild their lives, navigating the lingering effects of trauma while transforming their experience into a source of advocacy and education. Therapy became a central part of their daily routines, helping each family member process the fear, anxiety, and helplessness that had dominated the night of the intrusion. Jonathan focused on rebuilding his sense of control, implementing structured routines at home, engaging in physical activity, and participating in workshops on resilience and crisis management. Alex dedicated herself to supporting the children while also raising awareness about the psychological impact of obsessive and violent intrusions. Ethan, who had been released first during the standoff, channeled his experience into school and community leadership, speaking to peers about vigilance, communication, and the importance of recognizing and reporting suspicious behaviors. Sophia, initially overwhelmed by the terror of being directly confronted, found healing through art therapy, using her creativity to process fear and regain a sense of safety and personal agency. Beyond personal recovery, the Carvers became a focal point for broader community education and policy discussion. Their ordeal highlighted the vulnerabilities even in well-secured suburban neighborhoods and the critical importance of awareness, preparation, and coordination between families and law enforcement. Highland Park and surrounding municipalities implemented enhanced safety workshops for residents, emphasizing situational awareness, the recognition of obsessive behaviors, and practical steps for home security. Schools incorporated lessons on personal safety, responsible use of social media, and strategies for seeking help when confronted with harassment or stalking. Local police departments referenced the Carver case as a training model, reviewing negotiation tactics, tactical entry protocols, and the importance of intelligence gathering in domestic intrusion scenarios. The incident catalyzed a shift in community perception, reinforcing that even affluent and seemingly secure households were not immune to obsessive criminal behavior, and that proactive measures could save lives. The legal implications of the case continued to reverberate. Marcus Ellington's conviction and life sentence without parole became a reference point in discussions of criminal justice, particularly concerning premeditated domestic intrusion and obsession-driven crimes. Legal scholars cited the case in analyses of risk assessment, sentencing guidelines, and the challenges of balancing mental health considerations with the need to protect potential victims. Legislators in Illinois examined the case as they evaluated laws relating to stalking, harassment, and aggravated kidnapping, ultimately proposing measures to strengthen early intervention mechanisms, improve monitoring of individuals with escalating patterns of obsession, and facilitate rapid law enforcement response. Marcus's case also underscored the importance of digital forensics, as his social media monitoring and detailed surveillance had provided critical evidence for both prosecutors and defense teams, illustrating the intersection of technology, obsession, and crime in the modern age. In addition to legislative and community responses, the Carvers themselves became active advocates for domestic safety and mental health awareness. Jonathan collaborated with financial institutions to promote secure digital practices and educate families on the importance of safeguarding personal information that could be exploited by obsessive or criminal individuals. Alex partnered with healthcare organizations to highlight the psychological impact of domestic intrusions, particularly on children, advocating for trauma-informed care and the integration of crisis preparedness into school and community programs. Ethan and Sophia, with guidance from their parents and counselors, participated in youth outreach initiatives, speaking about resilience, communication, and the importance of community vigilance. Their involvement underscored that recovery was not only about personal healing, but also about empowering others to prevent or survive similar threats. Over time, the Carver family's home on Maplewood Drive became both a symbol of survival and a center for education. Enhanced security systems, structured emergency plans, and ongoing family discussions about safety created an environment where the family could regain a sense of normalcy while remaining vigilant. Their experience inspired neighbors to take proactive measures, reinforcing the concept that community-wide awareness and preparedness could mitigate risk. Workshops and seminars, often co-led by law enforcement and the Carvers themselves, used the family's story to illustrate practical strategies for crisis prevention, negotiation, and safe intervention in domestic intrusion cases. The narrative emphasized that even in situations where violence is meticulously planned, informed, composed, and coordinated responses could preserve life and limit harm. As the years passed, the psychological resilience of the Carvers became increasingly evident. The children matured into confident, thoughtful adolescents, guided by the lessons learned during the ordeal. Ethan's leadership and advocacy in school and community settings reflected a deep understanding of responsibility, courage, and vigilance, while Sophia's artistic pursuits demonstrated that creativity could serve as a powerful tool for healing and empowerment. Jonathan and Alex continued to balance professional obligations with advocacy work, establishing programs that connected families, schools, and law enforcement to foster safer environments. Their story, widely covered in media retrospectives and educational forums, became an enduring example of both the danger of obsession-driven crimes and the capacity for recovery, resilience, and proactive engagement. The broader implications of the Carver case extended beyond Highland Park. Legal scholars, psychologists, and law enforcement agencies nationwide referenced the incident in discussions of domestic security, obsessive behavior, and risk management. It highlighted the importance of integrating psychological assessment, technological surveillance, and community awareness into strategies for preventing and responding to targeted intrusions. Mental health professionals emphasized early identification of obsessive patterns, interventions designed to mitigate escalation, and the necessity of clear communication between individuals, families, and authorities. The case became a benchmark in training materials, academic studies, and community safety programs, demonstrating that meticulous planning, observation, and rapid professional response could prevent tragedy even in high-stakes domestic situations. By 2030, the Carver family had not only survived, but transformed their trauma into meaningful action. Their advocacy, combined with policy improvements, community engagement, and law enforcement training enhancements, contributed to a measurable increase in neighborhood safety awareness and preparedness across the region. The story of that November night in 2025 served as a reminder of the intersection between obsession, premeditation, and domestic vulnerability, while also exemplifying the human capacity for courage, resilience, and transformation. The Carvers' experience emphasized that even in the face of calculated, deliberate violence, careful observation, strategic action, and community support could prevent fatalities, minimize harm, and turn an episode of terror into a catalyst for lasting change. Ultimately, the Carver case remains a defining example of modern suburban vulnerability and human resilience. It demonstrates that even seemingly secure households can be targeted by individuals driven by obsession and delusion, but it also illustrates the profound difference that preparedness, composure, and coordinated professional intervention can make. The Carvers' journey from terror to advocacy embodies a full spectrum of human experience: fear, courage, loss of innocence, and the deliberate choice to transform trauma into purpose. Their story continues to inspire families, communities, and professionals, reminding society that vigilance, resilience, and collective action are essential in confronting the calculated threats that can arise even in the most ordinary and peaceful lives. Story 3. On a quiet autumn evening in May 2025, the seaside city of Wollongong, New South Wales, was thrust into the national spotlight following a crime that would shock residents and authorities alike. Known for its picturesque beaches, university campuses, and tight-knit communities, Wollongong seemed an unlikely stage for a violent and meticulously planned act. Yet what began as a seemingly ordinary evening for one local family escalated into a terrifying ordeal that would reverberate across Australia. The victims, the Hargrove family, were well known in their neighborhood for their community involvement, professional success, and active parenting. But their routine and predictability had caught the attention of a man whose obsessions and delusions had been steadily escalating. This is the story of the Hargroves, a story of terror, survival, and resilience, as well as a stark reminder of the dangers of fixation, premeditation, and violence that can strike even the safest communities. The Hargroves were respected pillars of Wollongong society. Matthew Hargrove, 47, was a civil engineer with a specialization in urban infrastructure and had earned a reputation for both integrity and expertise in his field. Born in 1978 in Sydney, Matthew had grown up in a disciplined household, the middle child of three, with a father who ran a local construction firm and a mother who worked as a secondary school teacher. His upbringing instilled values of responsibility, problem solving, and persistence. After completing a degree in civil engineering at the University of New South Wales, Matthew quickly built a career that afforded his family both security and respect. He married Olivia Hargrove, 44, in 2003. Olivia, born in 1981 in Wollongong, was a senior nurse at Wollongong Hospital with a focus on pediatric care. Known for her warmth, dedication, and tireless work ethic, Olivia was beloved by colleagues, patients, and the community at large. Together, Matthew and Olivia had built a home that reflected their commitment to family, stability, and community involvement. The Hargroves' two children, Lucas and Isabella, were central to their lives. Lucas, 15, was a promising rugby player and academically gifted, recently assuming a leadership role in his school's student council. Isabella, 12, was a talented musician, playing both piano and violin, and had won several local competitions. The family maintained close relationships with neighbors and participated actively in school and local charitable initiatives. Their home on Bayview Drive, a modern two-story residence with advanced security measures, manicured gardens, and a backyard that overlooked the coastline, reflected their careful planning, success, and attention to safety. Yet it was precisely the predictability of their lives, their routines, schedules, and visibility within the community that made them a target for someone whose obsession had grown increasingly dangerous over months. The threat emerged in the form of a man named Damien Cross, 32, a former colleague of Matthew's at a small engineering consultancy. Damien, born in 1993 in Newcastle, had a long history of erratic behavior, ranging from minor thefts to harassment, and had spent time in psychiatric care due to escalating delusional fixations and obsessive tendencies. His grievances, real and imagined, against colleagues and peers had increasingly turned outward, focusing particularly on Matthew and Olivia. Over several months, Damien had monitored the Hargroves' social media activity, tracked their outings, and even conducted casual inquiries with neighbors under false pretenses to gain information on their routines. While outwardly polite and unassuming to those in his professional and social circles, his obsession had intensified to the point that he meticulously planned an intrusion to exact control over the family, convinced that they had wronged him in subtle, imperceptible ways. On the evening of May 17, 2025, Damien executed the plan he had been carefully orchestrating for weeks. Under the guise of a home delivery service, he approached the Hargrove residence and gained access by exploiting a combination of social engineering and timing that he had observed during repeated surveillance. Once inside, he revealed the weapons and restraints he had concealed, immediately asserting control over the family. Matthew, returning briefly from work to check on an urgent project, was the first to encounter Damien, who restrained him with zip ties and a cord taken from a backpack. Olivia, preparing dinner and unaware of the intrusion, was quickly overpowered and moved to a separate room, while Lucas and Isabella, completing homework and music practice respectively, were restrained in their rooms. Damien maintained a chilling calm, alternating between verbal intimidation and threats of violence, keeping the family isolated and under psychological pressure while methodically asserting dominance over the household. Damien's intrusion was executed with meticulous planning. He demanded access to financial accounts, personal information, and valuables, using both threats and manipulation to maintain control. He alternated between periods of quiet observation and bursts of aggression, keeping the family off balance and uncertain about his next move. The Hargroves, though terrified, remained acutely aware of their surroundings, observing Damien's behavior and subtly signaling each other in silence, communicating plans to remain composed, and waiting for any opportunity to alert authorities without provoking a violent reaction. Every detail, from the placement of restraints to the timing of Damien's movements, was critical, as a single misstep could trigger extreme consequences. Outside, neighbors began noticing unusual activity. Lights flickered at odd times, and the presence of a man repeatedly entering and exiting the property drew suspicion. One neighbor, Emma Reynolds, called the Wollongong police after observing Damien loitering and behaving unusually around the property. Police responded immediately, dispatching patrol units and initiating contact protocols. SWAT teams and crisis negotiators were mobilized, with tactical positioning and real-time monitoring established to ensure that any intervention would minimize risk to the family. Negotiators began making contact with Damien, attempting to establish communication, de-escalate the situation, and encourage the release of one or more hostages as a gesture of compliance, while tactical teams prepared for rapid intervention should the situation deteriorate. Inside, the Hargroves continued to endure the psychological strain of the intrusion. Matthew, using small opportunities, tested his restraints and observed Damien's behavior, looking for patterns or lapses that could be exploited to ensure safety or facilitate escape. Olivia, maintaining composure for the children, whispered instructions to Lucas and Isabella, teaching them to remain calm, observe Damien's tendencies, and look for moments when the intruder's attention faltered. Lucas, though only 15, displayed remarkable situational awareness, noting Damien's focus and creating subtle distractions when possible. Isabella, frightened but alert, remained quiet, learning from her parents' cues and contributing to the silent coordination that would become crucial as the night progressed. As the night deepened, Damien Cross's control over the Hargrove household intensified, yet subtle cracks in his focus began to appear. Hours of isolation, tension, and obsession had left him increasingly irritable and unpredictable. He demanded precise compliance from Matthew, Olivia, Lucas, and Isabella, alternately threatening physical harm and insisting on explanations for imagined slights and grievances. His movements became more erratic, pacing from room to room, muttering to himself about perceived injustices, and occasionally gesturing violently toward walls or objects as if responding to unseen provocations. Despite the fear and intimidation, the family remained observant and silent, aware that any sudden reaction could provoke extreme consequences. Matthew quietly tested the restraints when Damien was distracted, attempting to loosen knots without drawing attention, while Olivia offered whispered reassurances to Lucas and Isabella, helping them focus on breathing and maintaining mental composure. Outside, Wollongong police had established a multi-layered response. Officers coordinated with SWAT teams and crisis negotiators, positioning units to cover entrances, exits, and potential escape routes, while also maintaining a discreet presence to avoid further agitating Damien. Negotiator Sergeant Claire Thompson engaged Damien over the phone, using calm and measured speech to encourage communication and cooperation. She appealed to his sense of self-interest, emphasizing the legal consequences of harming the family, while also subtly building rapport to maintain his attention. Her primary objective was to keep Damien engaged, buying precious time for tactical teams to plan a breach while minimizing the immediate risk to the hostages. At approximately 11:30 p.m., a breakthrough occurred when Damien allowed Lucas to fetch a glass of water, under the pretense that it would prevent the boy from panicking. Lucas used the brief freedom to scan the house, noting Damien's location, the placement of weapons, and potential points of weakness in his monitoring of the rooms. This reconnaissance, silent but critical, provided Matthew and Olivia with a clearer understanding of Damien's patterns and moments when he was most vulnerable to distraction or manipulation. Meanwhile, negotiators continued to converse with Damien, subtly probing his intentions while emphasizing the possibility of reduced consequences if he released hostages voluntarily. As the night progressed past midnight, Damien's behavior deteriorated further. His obsessive fixation on Matthew and Olivia became increasingly vocal, with accusations of personal betrayals, professional slights, and imagined conspiracies dominating his speech. Tactical teams monitored every word and movement, coordinating with negotiators to exploit even the slightest lapse in attention. Inside the house, the Hargroves maintained a disciplined approach, quietly preparing for any opportunity to escape or signal law enforcement, while also tending to each other's psychological state. Olivia's whispered guidance helped the children remain calm, instructing them to focus on Damien's breathing patterns, repeated gestures, and verbal tics, which could indicate moments of distraction or diminished focus. Around 1:15 a.m., Damien permitted a brief phone call under the guise of contacting a supposed associate, an opportunity that police seized to trace the call and confirm his location. This window allowed tactical teams to verify interior layouts and anticipate movement patterns, increasing the probability of a safe resolution. The intelligence gathered in these hours was crucial. Each observation, each movement of Damien, and each exchange provided actionable data for law enforcement to design a precise and effective intervention. By 2:00 a.m., Damien had grown fatigued and increasingly agitated. His attention wandered, and his erratic pacing left him vulnerable to distraction. Observing this, Matthew executed a quiet signal to Olivia and the children, encouraging coordinated subtle movements designed to divert Damien's attention long enough to allow one of them to reach a communication device or weaken restraints. These small acts of agency, though fraught with danger, were carefully orchestrated to maintain composure while probing for opportunities to regain control. Negotiators seized the moment, speaking to Damien with a renewed emphasis on voluntary surrender and the futility of continued aggression. They stressed that harming the family would ensure maximum legal consequences and would do nothing to rectify his grievances. Damien, increasingly unstable, vacillated between compliance and rage, providing critical opportunities for tactical observation and planning. SWAT teams reviewed interior schematics, the positioning of hostages and potential points of breach, coordinating an intervention that would minimize the risk of harm to the family. Around 3:00 a.m., a pivotal event occurred. Damien left the main living area to check the kitchen, temporarily leaving Matthew partially unobserved. Seizing the chance, Matthew quietly shifted position, loosening his restraints and signaling Olivia to do the same. The children, guided by their parents, remained still and silent, observing Damien's back and movements while waiting for a critical window. Negotiators maintained contact, buying additional time by engaging Damien in lengthy conversations, keeping him unaware that the family was beginning to take small, controlled actions toward self-liberation. By 3:30 a.m., law enforcement had finalized a tactical entry plan. Surveillance and observations from neighbors, combined with intelligence from negotiators and subtle reconnaissance by the hostages, allowed for a precise operation to be executed. Officers prepared to breach from multiple angles, aiming to neutralize Damien's threat while ensuring the safety of Matthew, Olivia, Lucas, and Isabella. The coordination required split-second timing and clear communication, balancing the volatile mental state of Damien with the need to protect the family. As the first hints of dawn approached, Wollongong police and SWAT teams prepared for the final phase of the operation. Months of meticulous planning by Damien Cross had culminated in these tense hours, yet every moment of his obsession had also provided law enforcement with detailed insights into his behavior. Tactical officers coordinated silently around the perimeter, communicating via earpieces and hand signals to ensure absolute synchronization. Negotiator Sergeant Claire Thompson continued her dialogue with Damien, her voice calm but firm, keeping him focused on conversation while subtly encouraging him to consider the option of surrender. Her goal was to keep him engaged until teams could execute a breach with minimal risk to the family. Inside the house, Matthew, Olivia, Lucas, and Isabella remained resolute, prepared to follow any opportunity for liberation while minimizing the chance of provoking a violent reaction. At approximately 4:05 a.m., Damien's attention momentarily shifted when a faint noise outside the back of the house drew his gaze. This small distraction allowed Matthew to subtly loosen the final restraints, freeing one hand while keeping Damien unaware. Olivia whispered quietly to Lucas and Isabella, guiding them to shift slightly toward the kitchen, the area closest to the rear exit that law enforcement had identified as a safe egress point. Damien, agitated and increasingly erratic, continued his obsessive ranting, pacing the main hallway and gesturing violently toward imaginary adversaries. The tactical team, watching surveillance feeds and listening to negotiator communications, prepared to move. Every officer understood that any misstep could result in catastrophic consequences, but the detailed planning and intelligence gathered over the night maximized the probability of success. At 4:20 a.m., the tactical breach commenced. SWAT officers moved simultaneously through the front and rear entrances, employing armored shields and precise positioning to prevent Damien from harming the family. Inside, the Hargroves were instructed to remain calm and follow clear directions, moving in unison to safe zones designated by the officers. Damien initially reacted with shock and aggression, attempting to flee toward the living room, but officers swiftly contained him, disarming and restraining him within minutes. His panic, compounded by fatigue and the overwhelming presence of law enforcement, left him unable to resist or act with precision. Matthew, Olivia, Lucas, and Isabella were immediately secured by officers and escorted out of the residence, shaken but unharmed. Paramedics conducted rapid assessments, confirming that the family had suffered only minor physical injuries, primarily bruising and strain from the restraints. Psychological support teams were deployed immediately, recognizing the acute trauma and the necessity of addressing shock, anxiety, and fear in real time. The family members were reunited outside the home, holding each other while officers ensured that Damien remained restrained and contained. The operation, executed with precision and coordination, was considered a textbook example of crisis negotiation and tactical intervention, preventing potential fatalities and preserving the safety of all involved. Once the immediate threat was neutralized, Wollongong police began a comprehensive forensic investigation. Every aspect of Damien's intrusion was meticulously documented. The placement of restraints, weapons, digital devices, notes detailing his surveillance of the Hargrove family, and items used to control the household. Evidence from Damien's backpack revealed extensive premeditation, including detailed notes on the family's routines, social media monitoring, and plans for escape or retaliation. Digital forensics uncovered weeks of research, obsessive tracking of the family's schedules, and photographs of the home's interior taken during previous surveillance visits. These materials provided an indisputable record of the calculated nature of Damien's actions. As news of the event spread, the Wollongong community reacted with shock and empathy. Residents organized support networks for the Hargroves and other families, emphasizing the importance of vigilance and community awareness. Local media covered the story extensively, highlighting the bravery and composure of the Hargrove family, the effectiveness of police intervention, and the critical role of neighbor vigilance in initiating the response. The incident sparked widespread discussion on the dangers posed by obsession-driven intrusions, the responsibilities of law enforcement in crisis situations, and the intersection of mental health, premeditation, and violence. Legal proceedings began swiftly due to the strength of the evidence. Prosecutors presented a comprehensive case, detailing Damien's prior criminal record, his obsessive monitoring of the Hargroves, and his meticulously orchestrated plan. Testimonies from law enforcement officers, forensic experts, and the Hargrove family highlighted both the severity and premeditation of the crime. Damien's defense team attempted to argue mental instability and diminished capacity, citing his history of psychiatric treatment and obsessive tendencies. However, the overwhelming evidence of deliberate planning, targeted surveillance, and calculated execution undermined claims that he was unaware of the consequences of his actions. Video evidence, digital logs, and detailed forensic analysis painted a clear picture of a man fully cognizant of his behavior, intent on exerting control, and deliberately putting a family at risk. Throughout the trial, the Hargrove family remained actively engaged, providing testimony that outlined the terror, manipulation, and psychological strain inflicted over the hours of the intrusion. Their calm, measured accounts illustrated not only the impact of the crime, but also the critical role their own composure played in preserving life. Lucas and Isabella, supported by their parents and counselors, described the moments of fear, the silent signals exchanged, and the strategies they employed to survive. Their statements underscored the combination of courage, observation, and careful coordination that had allowed them to endure the ordeal. After several weeks of testimony, cross-examination, and presentation of evidence, the jury reached a verdict. Damien Cross was found guilty on multiple counts, including aggravated kidnapping, unlawful restraint, aggravated assault with a weapon, and premeditated home intrusion. In delivering the sentence, the judge emphasized the severity of the premeditation, the psychological cruelty inflicted on the family, and the threat posed by Damien's obsessive behavior. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a decision reflecting both the deliberate nature of the crime and the need to protect the public from a calculated, dangerous individual. In the months following the ordeal, the Hargrove family began the long and challenging process of rebuilding their lives, both physically and emotionally. Therapy and counseling became central to their daily routines, helping each member process the fear, anxiety, and lingering hypervigilance that had persisted since the night of the intrusion. Matthew and Olivia worked closely with mental health professionals, attending sessions focused on trauma, coping mechanisms, and strategies to regain a sense of safety and control. Lucas and Isabella, though still adolescents, demonstrated remarkable resilience. With the guidance of child psychologists, they learned to articulate their fears, understand the psychological impact of the trauma, and develop practical skills to regain confidence in their daily routines. Family sessions emphasized open communication, ensuring that everyone could share experiences and emotions safely, fostering a sense of unity and mutual support that became the cornerstone of their recovery. Beyond personal healing, the Hargroves became actively involved in community education and advocacy. Their experience highlighted the vulnerabilities present even in well-secured homes and emphasized the importance of awareness, preparedness, and coordinated responses between families and law enforcement. They collaborated with Wollongong Police to develop educational workshops for local residents, teaching strategies for recognizing obsessive or threatening behaviors, securing homes, and responding effectively in crisis situations. Schools incorporated lessons on personal safety, digital vigilance, and the responsible use of social media, using the Hargroves' story as a real-life example of how seemingly ordinary information could be exploited by dangerous individuals. Community meetings, neighborhood watch programs, and safety seminars increased in attendance, with the Hargroves participating as both educators and advocates, ensuring that the lessons from their ordeal had a broad and lasting impact. The legal aftermath of Damien Cross's conviction also served as a catalyst for broader policy discussions. Legal experts and law enforcement agencies analyzed the case in depth, particularly the intersection of mental health issues, obsessive behaviors, and the risks posed by premeditated domestic intrusions. Damien's extensive digital surveillance and meticulous planning underscored the importance of integrating technological monitoring into investigative procedures, as well as the value of early intervention in cases of escalating obsessive behavior. Discussions among policymakers in New South Wales led to proposed reforms in stalking legislation, mental health intervention protocols, and enhanced monitoring of individuals with prior records of harassment or violence. Damien's case became a reference point in training programs for law enforcement, social workers, and legal professionals, illustrating the need for early identification, risk assessment, and coordinated response. Within the family, the recovery process also included practical measures to restore a sense of security in their daily lives. Their home on Bayview Drive was reinforced with advanced security systems, emergency protocols were formalized, and regular drills were conducted to ensure that each family member understood how to respond safely in case of future threats. Matthew, drawing on his engineering expertise, collaborated with security professionals to design contingency plans for the home, including discrete communication channels, hidden safe areas, and strategic placement of monitoring devices. Olivia focused on fostering emotional resilience, ensuring that the children felt supported, informed, and empowered rather than trapped in fear. Over time, these measures contributed to a gradual restoration of confidence, allowing the family to reclaim a sense of normalcy while remaining vigilant and prepared. The Hargroves' advocacy extended beyond personal safety to broader mental health awareness. They partnered with local healthcare organizations to highlight the dangers of obsession-driven behavior and the psychological toll on victims, emphasizing early intervention, crisis prevention, and trauma-informed care. Matthew and Olivia spoke at conferences, community forums, and schools, discussing the warning signs of escalating obsession, the importance of observation and documentation, and strategies to protect vulnerable individuals. Lucas and Isabella, supported by their parents and counselors, also contributed by sharing their experiences in age-appropriate forums, emphasizing resilience, communication, and the importance of speaking up when something feels unsafe. Their collective efforts helped raise awareness across the community and provided tangible guidance for families facing similar threats. By 2027, the Hargroves' story had become widely known across New South Wales and nationally. Media outlets highlighted not only the terror of the intrusion, but also the remarkable resilience, coordination, and courage displayed by the family. Their advocacy led to measurable increases in neighborhood safety awareness, more rigorous home security protocols, and the implementation of early intervention programs for obsessive or potentially dangerous individuals. The incident catalyzed ongoing dialogue between law enforcement, mental health professionals, educators, and policymakers, reinforcing the importance of a multifaceted approach to preventing and responding to domestic threats. Despite the trauma endured, the Hargroves gradually reclaimed their lives. Family activities, school engagement, community service, and professional endeavors provided structure and purpose, fostering a sense of agency and control. Matthew returned to work with renewed dedication, integrating lessons learned from the incident into urban safety and infrastructure planning. Olivia continued her career in pediatric care while expanding her outreach in trauma-informed health education. Lucas and Isabella pursued their academic and extracurricular passions, their experiences instilling a heightened sense of empathy, vigilance, and responsibility. Their growth reflected the combination of personal resilience, family cohesion, and community support that had carried them through the crisis. Over the longer term, the case of Damien Cross and the Hargrove family became emblematic of both the dangers posed by obsession-driven domestic intrusions and the potential for survival through careful observation, strategic action, and community support. Legal experts cited the case in discussions of sentencing, premeditation, and risk assessment, while psychologists referenced it in studies of trauma, resilience, and the impact of extreme fear on adolescents and adults alike. The Hargroves' advocacy, combined with systemic reforms in community safety, mental health monitoring, and law enforcement response, helped ensure that the lessons of their ordeal extended far beyond their immediate neighborhood. Ultimately, the Hargrove family's journey from terror to recovery and advocacy exemplifies the capacity of individuals and communities to respond to calculated, deliberate violence with courage, composure, and constructive action. Their story serves as a stark reminder that even in safe and seemingly ordinary settings, premeditated threats can emerge, but also that resilience, preparation, and coordinated intervention can prevent tragedy, protect lives, and transform trauma into lasting positive change. In the annals of modern Australian true crime, the Hargroves' experience stands as a testament to human strength, the power of family unity, and the importance of community vigilance in confronting obsession and violence. Story 4. On a crisp spring evening in April 2025, the quiet suburban city of Saitama, just north of Tokyo, became the scene of a chilling crime that would send shockwaves through the nation. Known for its orderly streets, proximity to the capital, and tight-knit residential communities, Saitama seemed a safe haven for families seeking stability and routine. Yet, on that seemingly ordinary evening, the Nakamura family found themselves at the center of a calculated, meticulously planned act of violence that would alter their lives forever. The family, respected in their neighborhood for their dedication to community, education, and professional excellence, had routines so well established that they became the blueprint for the obsessive plans of an individual who had fixated on them. This is the story of the Nakamuras, a story of terror, resilience, and survival, and also a case that would ignite nationwide discussions on domestic security, mental health, and the dark consequences of obsession. The Nakamuras were emblematic of suburban Japanese success and harmony. Kenji Nakamura, 46, was an accomplished software engineer specializing in cybersecurity, employed by a major technology firm in Tokyo. Born in 1979 in Yokohama, Kenji had grown up in a disciplined household with strong values emphasizing education, responsibility, and respect. His father was a civil servant, and his mother was a high school teacher, instilling in him a strong moral compass and work ethic. After graduating from Keio University with a degree in computer science, Kenji quickly rose through the ranks of the tech industry, earning respect for his intellect, problem-solving abilities, and integrity. He married Yumi Nakamura, 44, in 2004. Yumi, born in 1981 in Saitama, was a dedicated nurse specializing in maternal and child care, known for her warmth, professionalism, and tireless commitment to her patients. Together, Kenji and Yumi had built a life that combined professional achievement, family stability, and active community involvement. The Nakamuras had two children, Riku, 15, and Eiko, 12. Riku, a bright and athletic student, excelled academically while playing on his high school's basketball team and participating in the student council. Eiko was a gifted pianist and avid reader, with a passion for science and an inquisitive nature that endeared her to teachers and friends alike. The family maintained close relationships with neighbors, participated in community service, and often hosted school and neighborhood gatherings. Their home in the quiet Minami ward was a two-story modern residence with a small garden, traditional wooden accents, and multiple layers of security, reflecting both their aesthetic sensibilities and careful attention to safety. Yet, despite these precautions, their predictability and visibility within the community had drawn the attention of an individual whose fixation would soon escalate into violence. The perpetrator was a man named Hiroshi Takeda, 33, a former acquaintance of Kenji's from university days, whose life had become increasingly unhinged. Born in 1992 in Chiba, Hiroshi had exhibited early signs of obsessional and erratic behavior, ranging from minor thefts and harassment to increasingly disturbing social media posts fixating on peers. Over the years, he had spent time in psychiatric care, but repeated lapses in supervision, and his ability to mask instability allowed him to operate freely in society. His resentment toward Kenji and his family had grown from vague jealousy and perceived slights into a dangerous obsession. Over several months, Hiroshi meticulously tracked the Nakamura's routines, social media activity, and public appearances, gathering information that would allow him to execute a home intrusion with precision and control. On the evening of April 12, 2025, Hiroshi executed his plan. Disguised as a delivery worker from a local courier company, he approached the Nakamura residence and gained entry by exploiting the predictable evening routine he had observed for months. Once inside, he revealed weapons and restraints concealed in his bag, immediately asserting control over Kenji, Yumi, Riku, and Eiko. Kenji, arriving briefly from work to review urgent tasks on his laptop, was quickly restrained with corded ties Hiroshi had prepared, while Yumi, preparing dinner, was ushered into the living room and bound. Riku and Eiko, engaged in homework and music practice, were moved to separate rooms. Hiroshi alternated between verbal intimidation, threats of physical harm, and psychological manipulation, isolating the family and establishing absolute control. Every movement was calculated, his obsessive focus ensuring that the family remained under his dominion, while he systematically executed the plan he had envisioned for months. Hours passed in a tense, silent standoff. Hiroshi demanded access to the family's financial accounts, passwords, and valuables, using intimidation to enforce compliance. He monitored their every movement, ensuring that any attempt at communication or escape would be immediately noticed. The family, though terrified, remained observant, communicating silently through subtle gestures and eye contact, formulating strategies to endure the ordeal. Kenji noted patterns in Hiroshi's pacing and attention, observing the moments when his vigilance lapsed. Yumi quietly instructed the children to remain calm, breathe deeply, and avoid any sudden movements, instilling a sense of agency amidst overwhelming fear. Outside, a vigilant neighbor, Takashi Mori, had noticed the delivery vehicle parked unusually long at the Nakamura residence and called Saitama police. Officers responded promptly, establishing perimeter control while crisis negotiators attempted to engage Hiroshi via mobile communication. The negotiators, trained in de-escalation and hostage scenarios, focused on maintaining dialogue, preventing escalation, and creating a window for tactical intervention. Surveillance units observed the property, mapping entry points, potential hazards, and areas of concealment, ensuring that any breach would maximize the chances of preserving the family's safety. By late evening, Hiroshi began exhibiting signs of fatigue and mental strain. The prolonged stress of maintaining control over 4 hostages, combined with his obsessive fixations, led to brief lapses in attention. Kenji noticed these and subtly shifted position when Hiroshi moved to check security cameras in the hallway. Riku, observing his father's cues, began quietly preparing to exploit any opportunity for signaling or restrained movement, while Eiko focused on following her mother's guidance, remaining silent and attentive. Negotiators continued speaking to Hiroshi, emphasizing that harming the family would ensure severe legal consequences and urging compliance, while buying time for a tactical intervention. As the night deepened in Saitama, the tension inside the Nakamura home escalated. Hiroshi Takeda, though outwardly composed, was becoming increasingly agitated. Hours of maintaining control over the family, coupled with his obsessive focus and delusional narratives, had begun to fray his concentration. He paced through the hallways, muttering incoherently about imagined slights and grievances, sometimes gesturing violently toward objects as if they were responsible for his anger. His meticulous planning had not accounted for fatigue, and now subtle lapses in vigilance emerged, giving the family crucial windows to observe, strategize, and coordinate in silence. Kenji, still restrained but alert, noted Hiroshi's repeated patterns, the way he would glance at certain corners of the living room, the brief pauses when pacing, and the distracted attention he gave to the television. Every observation became a critical data point for potential self-liberation. Yumi, with quiet determination, maintained a sense of calm for the children, whispering instructions to Riku and Eiko. She taught them to focus on Hiroshi's breathing, the timing of his movements, and the subtle shifts in his mood that might indicate distraction. Riku, 15 and astutely aware, took careful note of the intruder's body language, mentally mapping escape routes and possible ways to exploit small lapses. Eiko, though only 12, followed her mother's guidance with remarkable composure, remaining observant and silent while Kenji coordinated subtle adjustments in their positioning, all intended to minimize the risk of detection. The family's collective attention to detail, composure under extreme stress, and silent coordination became a lifeline in the dark hours of the night. Meanwhile, outside the residence, Saitama police had established a comprehensive perimeter, with uniformed officers monitoring entrances and exits, while surveillance drones provided real-time visual data. Crisis negotiators maintained constant communication with Hiroshi, speaking in measured tones designed to engage him in conversation, while subtly delaying any escalation of violence. Negotiators emphasized the legal consequences of harming the family and attempted to appeal to any sense of self-preservation, highlighting that voluntary surrender would result in the least severe outcome. The delicate balance between negotiation and preparation for tactical intervention required constant recalibration, as officers weighed the risks of immediate breach against the likelihood of securing a safer opportunity. By approximately 1:00 a.m., subtle opportunities began to emerge. Hiroshi's attention wandered as he checked the living room for hidden surveillance devices he believed might be planted by Kenji's tech expertise. Taking advantage of this distraction, Kenji quietly began loosening the restraints on his wrists, signaling Yumi and the children to mirror the movements carefully. Each subtle shift, each incremental adjustment, had to be executed with extreme caution. A single misstep could provoke immediate violence. Negotiators continued their dialogue, buying additional time by discussing imagined grievances Hiroshi claimed to have with colleagues and neighbors, keeping his attention diverted from the precise movements within the house. Around 1:45 a.m., a breakthrough occurred. Hiroshi permitted Riku to fetch water, insisting that it would prevent the boy from panicking. Riku used the brief freedom to scan the house, memorizing the locations of weapons, doors, and potential obstacles, and signaling Kenji with subtle nods. This reconnaissance, though silent and constrained, provided critical intelligence for both the family and law enforcement, allowing officers to refine tactical approaches while providing the family with information that would inform their next moves. Each observed detail, from Hiroshi's pacing to the placement of his personal bag, offered opportunities to anticipate his behavior and prepare for intervention. As the hours dragged on, Hiroshi's mental state deteriorated further. His pacing became erratic, his mutterings louder and more fragmented, and his attention span increasingly fractured. The prolonged stress of controlling 4 hostages began to expose vulnerabilities. Observing these signs, negotiators escalated verbal strategies, emphasizing that continued aggression would only worsen his legal situation while reinforcing the possibility of voluntary surrender. Tactical teams reviewed every observation, mapping potential breach points, considering angles of entry, and coordinating contingencies in anticipation of the moment when a safe extraction could be executed. By 2:30 a.m., Kenji had successfully freed one hand, enabling him to manipulate the restraints on Yumi and quietly guide the children in small, controlled movements towards safer positions within their rooms. The family coordinated silently, moving only when Hiroshi's attention was elsewhere, using subtle cues and eye contact to synchronize their efforts. Negotiators continued to engage Hiroshi in lengthy conversations, subtly exploiting his obsessive tendencies by asking him to recount past perceived wrongs, drawing his focus away from the family's incremental efforts to regain mobility and assert agency. Around 3:00 a.m., a critical opportunity presented itself. Hiroshi moved to check the hallway cameras he believed were monitoring the property, leaving Kenji momentarily unobserved. Taking advantage of the distraction, Kenji directed Yumi and the children to inch closer to the rear exit, the location tactical teams had designated as the safest point for extraction. Observing the intruder's distraction and fatigue, negotiators encouraged Hiroshi to remain calm and comply, ensuring that his attention remained engaged while officers prepared for the final phase of tactical intervention. By 3:30 a.m., all preparations were in place. Tactical teams, informed by the family's subtle reconnaissance, negotiator intelligence, and continuous surveillance, were ready to breach the residence. Officers understood the importance of timing, coordination, and precision. The safety of Kenji, Yumi, Riku, and Eiko depended on executing the intervention with split-second accuracy. Inside the house, the family remained as calm as possible, poised to follow instructions and respond to the breach with controlled movements that would minimize risk. The convergence of negotiation, observation, and tactical readiness set the stage for a resolution that would ultimately determine whether the ordeal ended in safety or tragedy. As the first pale light of dawn began to creep over Saitama, tactical teams moved into position, preparing to execute the final phase of the operation with precision. Every officer involved had been briefed on the house layout, the movements and behaviors of Hiroshi Takeda, and the critical positions of the Nakamura family within the residence. Surveillance had confirmed his obsessive tendencies and predictable pacing patterns, providing the teams with precise timing for the breach. Negotiator Sergeant Ayumi Tanaka maintained her calm voice on the phone, speaking to Hiroshi as if in casual conversation, subtly drawing his attention to perceived external concerns while officers prepared to intervene. Her strategy relied on keeping him mentally engaged in discussion, delaying his ability to notice any sudden changes inside the home. At 4:05 a.m., a moment of opportunity arrived. Hiroshi left the main living area to inspect the kitchen, believing he had heard a faint sound near the rear window. Kenji, already partially freed from restraints, quietly signaled Yumi and the children to inch closer to one of the rear exits, the same area tactical officers had identified as the safest point for extraction. The family moved cautiously, relying on subtle gestures and careful timing to avoid alerting Hiroshi. Every second counted, and the Hargroves, aware of the danger, remained silent, controlled, and observant. At 4:12 a.m., SWAT officers commenced the breach. Teams entered from multiple points: the front door, the rear, and a side entrance, each unit employing armored shields and carefully coordinated movements to prevent Hiroshi from harming the family. Hiroshi, initially startled by the simultaneous intrusion, reacted with aggression, brandishing a small knife he had concealed. Officers contained his movements instantly, employing non-lethal methods to neutralize his immediate threat. Within moments, Hiroshi was restrained and disarmed, his attempts at violence halted by the swift and coordinated action of the tactical units. Kenji, Yumi, Riku, and Eiko were quickly secured by officers and guided out of the house to safety. The family, though shaken and exhausted, had escaped the ordeal physically unharmed, thanks to the combination of their composure, observation, and the precise execution of the tactical intervention. Paramedics and psychological support teams attended immediately, assessing the family for both physical strain and acute trauma. The children clung to their parents, processing the mixture of relief, fear, and residual tension that had accumulated over the night. Inside the residence, forensic teams began a meticulous investigation. Every room, every object, and every trace of Hiroshi's movements were documented in detail. Officers recovered the knife, digital devices, and personal notes that revealed the months of obsessive planning. Digital forensics uncovered extensive research on the family's routines, school schedules, social media activity, and even community events, confirming the premeditated nature of the intrusion. Surveillance footage captured from neighbors' cameras further corroborated the timeline of events, while Hiroshi's own statements, taken after his apprehension, provided insight into the obsessive and delusional mindset that had driven him to act. The Nakamura's ordeal quickly became a nationwide story. Media coverage highlighted the courage and composure of the family, the swift and effective response of law enforcement, and the frightening reality of obsession-driven intrusions. Psychologists and criminologists weighed in on the case, analyzing the behaviors that led to the crime and the tactics that allowed the family to survive. Community leaders organized forums and seminars on safety, digital awareness, and the importance of monitoring obsessive behaviors before they escalate. The incident prompted discussions on mental health monitoring, the responsibilities of family members and communities, and the need for early intervention when obsessive or dangerous behaviors are observed. Legal proceedings commenced soon after Hiroshi's arrest. Prosecutors presented an overwhelming case. Detailed evidence of premeditation, surveillance records, digital communications, and physical notes documenting the obsessive monitoring of the Nakamura family. Testimonies from officers, forensic experts, and the family highlighted both the meticulous nature of Hiroshi's planning and the psychological manipulation he had employed. The defense argued diminished capacity, citing his psychiatric history and previous treatments, but the preponderance of evidence demonstrated that he was fully aware of his actions, deliberate in his planning, and capable of understanding the consequences. During the trial, the Nakamuras provided detailed testimony of the terror they had endured, the strategies they employed to survive, and the composure they maintained under extreme duress. Riku and Eiko, supported by their parents and child psychologists, recounted their experience with remarkable clarity, explaining how their observation, careful communication, and adherence to their parents' guidance had allowed them to endure the hours of confinement and manipulation. Their statements became critical to illustrating both the deliberate cruelty of Hiroshi's actions and the extraordinary resilience of the family. After weeks of testimony, cross-examination, and the presentation of digital and forensic evidence, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Hiroshi Takeda was found guilty on multiple counts, including aggravated kidnapping, unlawful restraint, assault with a weapon, and premeditated home intrusion. In sentencing, the presiding judge emphasized the deliberate, obsessive nature of the crime, the psychological cruelty inflicted on the Nakamura family, and the clear intent to exert control and terror. Hiroshi was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, reflecting both the severity of the crime and the need to protect the public from an individual capable of meticulous, obsessive violence. In the weeks and months following the attack, the Nakamura family began the arduous process of healing, both physically and emotionally. Though they had escaped the night's terror without serious physical injuries, the psychological impact was profound. Kenji, Yumi, Riku, and Eiko attended daily therapy sessions to address acute trauma, anxiety, and the lingering hypervigilance that had developed over the ordeal. Family therapy focused on rebuilding a sense of trust, security, and control within their home, while providing strategies to cope with sudden stress and reminders of the event. Kenji, who had long been a problem solver professionally, now applied his skills to rebuilding emotional and practical resilience at home, working closely with therapists to create routines that reinforced safety while empowering each family member. Yumi guided the children in mindfulness exercises, grounding techniques, and verbalizing emotions, emphasizing that acknowledging fear was the first step in overcoming it. Beyond their personal recovery, the Nakamuras took on the role of advocates and educators within the Saitama community. Their ordeal became a catalyst for raising awareness about obsession-driven intrusions, stalking behaviors, and domestic security. Working alongside local law enforcement and community organizations, they organized seminars, workshops, and neighborhood meetings to educate families on early warning signs of obsessive behavior, digital vigilance, and emergency preparedness. Kenji, leveraging his cybersecurity expertise, highlighted the ways that digital footprints, social media activity, and routine exposure could be exploited by individuals with obsessive tendencies. Yumi contributed guidance on emotional safety, teaching families how to maintain communication, monitor children's well-being, and create safe home environments. These community efforts fostered a stronger sense of vigilance and collaboration, ensuring that neighbors were prepared to recognize threats and respond effectively. The legal aftermath of Hiroshi Takeda's conviction also prompted broader systemic discussions in Japan. Law enforcement agencies reviewed protocols for responding to home intrusions, hostage situations, and cases involving obsessive or mentally unstable individuals. Mental health professionals emphasized early intervention programs, advocating for closer monitoring and support for individuals displaying escalating obsessional tendencies. Hiroshi's premeditation and use of digital tools highlighted the growing intersection between technology, privacy, and personal safety, prompting policymakers to consider reforms in protective measures for families, stricter monitoring of known offenders, and improved coordination between social services and law enforcement. The case was studied extensively in training programs for police officers, crisis negotiators, and legal professionals, offering insight into how to prevent and respond to extreme domestic threats. Within the family, the recovery process was gradual and multidimensional. Their home was reinforced with enhanced security systems, panic protocols, and discreet communication methods. Kenji installed smart locks, cameras, and monitoring devices, ensuring that every family member could summon help quickly in the event of danger. Yumi worked to rebuild routines for the children that incorporated both structure and emotional reassurance, allowing Riku and Eiko to regain confidence in daily life. Both children returned to school and extracurricular activities with cautious optimism, gradually reclaiming the sense of normalcy that had been disrupted. The combination of family cohesion, practical safety measures, and professional support fostered resilience, enabling them to rebuild trust in their environment and regain control over their lives. Over the following year, the Nakamura's advocacy extended beyond immediate neighborhood concerns to national awareness campaigns. They collaborated with nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, and media outlets to discuss the dangers of obsession-driven violence and the importance of early intervention. Their story was used in seminars and conferences to illustrate the psychological, social, and technological factors that can contribute to domestic threats. Kenji participated in workshops on cybersecurity and digital vigilance, while Yumi provided insights into emotional resilience and trauma-informed care for families. Riku and Eiko, with guidance from therapists, contributed to youth-focused initiatives, speaking about the importance of communication, observation, and seeking help when feeling unsafe. By 2026, the Nakamura family had reestablished a sense of stability and purpose. Kenji returned to his professional work while continuing to advise on community safety initiatives. Yumi expanded her nursing work to include outreach for trauma-informed pediatric care, emphasizing both physical and psychological well-being. Riku focused on academics and sports, channeling his experiences into leadership roles within his school and community, while Eiko pursued music and science with renewed focus, inspired by her desire to contribute positively to society. Their experience, though marked by terror, became a source of strength, shaping their future decisions, their values, and their commitment to helping others. Hiroshi Takeda's conviction, life imprisonment sentence, and the detailed evidence presented during the trial became a reference point for Japanese legal, law enforcement, and mental health systems. The case highlighted the extreme dangers of obsession, the importance of meticulous preparation and observation in responding to domestic intrusions, and the potential for victims to survive through resilience, composure, and strategic thinking. The Nakamura's experience underscored the necessity of community awareness, coordinated intervention, and the combination of psychological and tactical expertise in preventing tragedy. Ultimately, the Nakamura family's journey exemplifies the capacity of individuals and families to confront premeditated, obsessive violence with courage, intelligence, and perseverance. Their ordeal served as both a warning and a lesson that vigilance, preparation, and calm under pressure can save lives, and that the strength of family and community can transform trauma into advocacy and positive societal impact. Story 5. On a humid evening in early June 2025, the serene beach town of Seminyak, Bali, became the backdrop for a chilling crime that would shock both locals and tourists alike. Known for its vibrant nightlife, luxurious villas, and close-knit expat communities, Seminyak was considered one of the safest areas on the island. Families and tourists strolled along the beaches, restaurants buzzed with conversation, and the warm glow of lanterns reflected off the waves. Yet, behind the facade of tranquility, one villa in the heart of the neighborhood became the target of a meticulously planned intrusion that would unfold into a harrowing ordeal for the residents. This is the story of the Hartono family, a story of terror, resilience, and survival, and of the obsessive individual whose fixation would devastate their lives while exposing vulnerabilities in both local security measures and social awareness. The Hartonos were a family emblematic of both Indonesian professional success and international connectivity. Adrian Hartono, 45, was a prominent entrepreneur, co-owner of a regional logistics company specializing in import-export operations across Southeast Asia. Born in Jakarta in 1980, Adrian had been raised in a family that valued discipline, education, and perseverance. He studied in Singapore before returning to Indonesia to build a business that combined local knowledge with international expertise. His wife, Natalia Hartono, 42, was a former university lecturer specializing in linguistics who had transitioned into a career managing international cultural programs and workshops for schools and community organizations. Together, they cultivated a life of stability, cultural engagement, and global awareness, balancing professional responsibilities with active involvement in their children's education and personal development. The Hartonos had 2 children, 16-year-old Daniel and 13-year-old Sophia. Daniel was a disciplined student, excelling academically while actively participating in local soccer clubs and volunteering in community environmental initiatives. Sophia, though younger, was curious, empathetic, and creative, with a passion for painting and music that reflected her lively personality and sharp intellect. The family had resided in Seminyak for several years, renting a modern 2-story villa near the beach, which combined open communal spaces with private bedrooms and a garden courtyard. They were well regarded in the community, participating in neighborhood initiatives, cultural programs, and expatriate associations, their visibility and engagement contributing to their sense of belonging and perceived safety. The individual who would bring terror into the Hartono household was a man named Iwan Prasetyo, 34, a former acquaintance of Adrian's business circles who had become increasingly unstable over the preceding years. Born in Surabaya in 1991, Iwan exhibited early signs of obsessive behavior and social detachment. After a series of failed business ventures and strained personal relationships, his resentment toward Adrian, perceived as a symbol of success and social acceptance, escalated into fixation. Iwan spent months gathering intelligence on the Hartono family, tracking their movements, social media activity, and daily routines, cultivating a deep, obsessive understanding of their schedules, habits, and vulnerabilities. His intentions, though never openly articulated, were characterized by a combination of jealousy, delusion, and a desire to assert control over a family he believed had wronged him in some intangible way. On the evening of June 8, 2025, Iwan executed his plan. Disguised as a delivery driver from a local courier service, he approached the Hartono villa under the cover of dusk. The family, engaged in dinner preparation and evening routines, did not notice the unusual duration of the delivery or the subtle changes in his demeanor. Iwan entered the property under the pretext of a package delivery, then quickly revealed a concealed weapon and restraints he had brought specifically for the intrusion. Adrian, returning briefly from a client meeting, was the first to be confronted and restrained with cords and duct tape, while Natalia, arranging the dining area, was moved into the living room and similarly bound. Daniel and Sophia were taken to separate rooms, instructed to remain silent, and warned that any resistance would result in harm. Iwan alternated between threats, manipulation, and psychological intimidation, ensuring that each family member understood both the immediate danger and their inability to escape without compliance. Hours passed in tense silence, punctuated by Iwan's pacing, mutterings, and obsessive focus on monitoring the family. He demanded passwords, access to financial accounts, and valuables, using fear to maintain control while exhibiting delusional monologues about perceived slights and injustices. Despite the terror, the Hartonos remained observant, silently communicating through gestures and eye contact. Adrian noted the precise timing of Iwan's movements, the moments when attention wavered, and patterns in his obsessive checking of the villa's perimeter and internal layout. Natalia instructed the children to remain calm, controlling breathing and remaining still to avoid drawing attention, while also memorizing objects and potential defensive tools within reach. The combination of observation, strategic patience, and psychological resilience became their lifeline as the night deepened, the tropical heat amplifying the tension and discomfort within the villa. Outside, a vigilant neighbor, Wayan Santoso, noticed the unusual presence of the delivery vehicle and contacted local authorities. The Bali police dispatched officers immediately, establishing a perimeter and coordinating with crisis negotiators, while surveillance units assessed the villa from a safe distance. Negotiators attempted to engage Iwan via mobile communication, speaking in calm, measured tones designed to buy time, distract him, and encourage compliance. Their objective was to prevent escalation and preserve the safety of the family while tactical teams prepared for intervention. Every piece of information gathered, from neighbors' observations to the family's subtle signals, contributed to a growing operational picture, guiding the authorities in real time. By midnight, subtle opportunities for the family began to emerge. Iwan's obsessive attention to perceived surveillance breaches allowed Adrian to manipulate his restraints incrementally, signaling Natalia and the children to do the same. Each slight adjustment required precision, patience, and absolute control. Any sudden movement risked detection and immediate retaliation. Negotiators continued their dialogue, asking Iwan to recount grievances and focusing his attention externally, maintaining a delicate balance that enabled the family to regain a measure of agency without provoking violence. The first hours of the night became a careful interplay between observation, patience, and the hope that the authorities would arrive in time to prevent tragedy. As the hours dragged on in the humid Bali night, tension within the Hartono villa escalated to nearly unbearable levels. Iwan Prasitio, despite his initial composure, began showing cracks in his obsessive control. The prolonged stress of maintaining dominance over 4 hostages, combined with the heat, anxiety, and his own delusional thoughts, caused brief lapses in attention that the Hartonos silently observed. Adrian, with careful movements, began loosening the cords that restrained his wrists, signaling Natalia and the children to do the same in measured increments. Each small adjustment was a calculated risk. A sudden noise, a misstep, or an unintended glance could provoke immediate violence. Natalia whispered instructions to Daniel and Sophia, reminding them to remain still, controlled, and observant, teaching them to anticipate Iwan's erratic movements and respond accordingly. Outside the villa, the Bali police had established a full perimeter, coordinating closely with crisis negotiators and tactical units. Drones provided a continuous aerial view of the property, mapping potential entry points and monitoring Iwan's movements inside the villa. Negotiator Lieutenant Pudu Suryati maintained a calm, persistent dialogue with Iwan over mobile phone, asking questions about his grievances, subtly validating minor complaints while repeatedly emphasizing that no harm needed to come to the family if he complied. The strategy was to distract Iwan, occupy his attention, and buy precious time while tactical officers prepared for a breach. Every second counted, and coordination between negotiators, surveillance teams, and tactical units became increasingly critical. By 1:30 a.m., subtle opportunities began to emerge for the Hartonos. Iwan, convinced that he was being monitored through cameras planted by Adrian, left the main living area to inspect the garden and back perimeter. During these moments, Adrian and Natalia quietly inched closer to the rear exit, following a pre-planned escape path that they had mapped mentally over the previous hours. Daniel and Sophia remained calm, aware of the movements above and relying on their parents' silent cues. Each step was measured. The family's survival depended entirely on patience, attention, and the precise exploitation of Iwan's momentary distractions. Around 2:00 a.m., the situation became increasingly unstable. Iwan's pacing intensified, his mutterings growing louder and more incoherent, reflecting his mental unraveling. He grew suspicious of minor sounds, footsteps on the wooden floor, a floorboard creaking, and directed sharp threats toward the family. Adrian's careful observation allowed him to predict these outbursts, ensuring that no movement coincided with periods of intense scrutiny. Negotiators continued their engagement, subtly manipulating Iwan's focus toward imagined grievances and external distractions, all while tactical teams finalized breach plans. The interplay between the family's composure, Iwan's erratic attention, and the officers' tactical readiness created a delicate balance that would determine whether the night ended in survival or tragedy. By 2:45 a.m., Adrian had successfully freed one hand completely, allowing him to assist Natalia and quietly instruct the children in minor adjustments that maximized mobility while minimizing risk. Tactical teams observed this progress through intelligence from negotiators and subtle cues detected via surveillance. They analyzed Iwan's patterns, when he would check the garden, inspect the rear exit, or move between rooms, allowing officers to determine the exact moment when intervention could be executed with the highest likelihood of preserving the family's safety. Every movement within the villa was now synchronized with external tactical planning, as the hours of observation, patience, and psychological endurance reached a critical juncture. Around 3:15 a.m., the first clear opportunity for intervention emerged. Iwan, preoccupied with checking a loose gate latch he believed had been tampered with, left the main living area entirely. Adrian quickly signaled Natalia and the children to move closer to the rear exit, staying low and quiet, inching along walls and furniture while avoiding loose floorboards that might betray their presence. Negotiators on the phone continued to speak to Iwan, engaging him in long-winded discussions about imagined injustices, drawing his attention away from the subtle but deliberate movements of the family. The precision of timing, combined with Iwan's distraction, created a narrow but critical window for tactical action. By 3:45 a.m., all preparations were finalized. Tactical officers, armed with shields, non-lethal tools, and precise coordination, readied themselves to enter the villa from multiple points. Their strategy emphasized protecting the hostages first, neutralizing Iwan without endangering the family, and securing the scene for immediate medical and psychological support. Inside the villa, Adrian and Natalia guided Daniel and Sophia into a discreet position near the rear exit, poised to comply with instructions from officers once the breach occurred. The convergence of the family's silent coordination, Iwan's obsessive distractions, and the officers' tactical readiness set the stage for a resolution that had been days, weeks, and months in preparation. As the first glimmers of dawn began to illuminate Seminyak, Bali, the tactical team moved decisively into position. Officers advanced with armored shields and careful coordination, prepared to neutralize Iwan Prasidio and secure the safety of the Hartono family. Negotiator Lieutenant Pudu Suryati maintained calm communication with Iwan, distracting him and keeping him mentally engaged with long, drawn-out questions about grievances, past perceived injustices, and hypothetical scenarios. His goal was to hold Iwan's attention while tactical teams closed in on the villa, timing each movement to maximize the chances of a safe intervention. Every second counted, and every officer involved understood the life-or-death stakes of the operation. At 4:05 a.m., the moment arrived. Officers breached the rear and side entrances simultaneously, shields raised, flashlights sweeping the rooms in a precise pattern. Iwan, startled by the coordinated intrusion, reacted violently, brandishing the small knife he had concealed in his clothing. Tactical teams responded instantly with non-lethal methods, including tasers and physical restraint techniques, neutralizing his ability to cause harm within moments. Within seconds, he was disarmed, cuffed, and restrained. The precision of the breach ensured that neither Adrian Natalia nor the children were harmed during the critical moments of intervention. Once Iwan was secured, officers focused on the family. Adrian, Natalia, Daniel, and Sophia were guided to safety, each of them shaking with relief, exhaustion, and residual fear. Paramedics immediately attended to the family, assessing for minor injuries and signs of acute stress, while psychological support personnel provided initial counseling to help them process the ordeal. Daniel and Sophia clung to their parents, their faces reflecting both terror and relief, finally understanding that the nightmare was over. The combination of family composure, tactical expertise, and precise coordination had averted what could have been a catastrophic tragedy. Inside the villa, forensic teams began a thorough investigation. Every room, every object, and every trace of Iwan's movements were meticulously documented. Officers recovered the knife, digital devices, and extensive notes outlining months of obsessive planning. These included detailed maps of the villa, schedules of the family's routines, and psychological observations of each member. Digital evidence revealed the depth of Iwan's fixation. He had monitored the family's social media accounts, tracked school events, and even observed their interactions with neighbors. Surveillance footage from nearby villas corroborated the timeline of the intrusion, capturing Iwan arriving in the guise of a delivery driver and his subsequent movements inside the property. The story quickly captured national and international attention. Media coverage emphasized both the severity of Iwan's obsession and the extraordinary composure of the Hartono family under extreme duress. Psychologists weighed in, analyzing the methods by which the family had maintained control over their fear, coordinated silently, and observed Iwan's patterns to exploit brief lapses in attention. The incident sparked broader discussions on community safety, digital security, and the warning signs of obsession-driven violence, particularly in regions frequented by expatriates and tourists. Bali, a region known for its welcoming atmosphere, was forced to confront the reality that even idyllic surroundings could conceal profound danger. Legal proceedings commenced swiftly. Prosecutors presented an airtight case, relying on the family's testimony, Iwan's own notes and digital records, and evidence from surveillance footage. Iwan's obsessive documentation of the family's routines, coupled with the meticulous planning of the intrusion, underscored premeditation, removing the possibility of the crime being construed as spontaneous. Defense counsel attempted to argue diminished capacity, citing Iwan's history of social isolation, failed business ventures, and psychological instability. However, the preponderance of evidence demonstrated that he was fully aware of his actions and capable of understanding the consequences. The Hartonos provided compelling testimony during the trial. Adrian detailed the ways he observed Iwan's behaviors, tracked patterns, and orchestrated subtle strategies to ensure their survival. Natalia recounted her guidance of Daniel and Sophia, teaching them to stay calm, remain silent, and follow careful instructions while memorizing potential tools and escape routes. Daniel and Sophia, under careful preparation and support from child psychologists, described how they maintained composure and followed their parents' guidance, providing a vivid account of the psychological endurance required to survive such an ordeal. Their testimonies highlighted not only the cruelty and obsessive nature of Iwan's actions, but also the remarkable resilience and intelligence the family displayed in navigating hours of extreme danger. After weeks of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Iwan Prasidio was convicted on multiple counts, including aggravated kidnapping, unlawful restraint, assault with a weapon, and premeditated home intrusion. The court emphasized the deliberate, obsessive planning involved, the psychological trauma inflicted on the family, and the clear intent to exert control and terror. The presiding judge sentenced Iwan to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, reflecting the severity of the crime and the necessity of protecting the public from an individual capable of obsessive violence. The sentence sent a powerful message regarding the consequences of premeditated obsession-driven intrusions and served as a precedent for future cases in Indonesia. In the weeks and months following the harrowing night, the Hartono family embarked on the long, delicate journey of healing. Physically, they were unharmed, but psychologically, the impact of the intrusion was profound. Adrian and Natalia prioritized both their own recovery and the emotional well-being of Daniel and Sophia, arranging daily therapy sessions with clinical psychologists experienced in trauma from hostage situations. The sessions focused on processing the fear, rebuilding trust within the home, and establishing routines that could restore a sense of safety. Adrian, who had always been strategic and analytical in business, applied similar skills to his family's recovery, meticulously organizing schedules, monitoring triggers, and reinforcing safety procedures. Natalia guided the children in emotional regulation, grounding exercises, and coping strategies to manage anxiety and intrusive thoughts, emphasizing that acknowledging fear was not weakness, but a necessary step in regaining control over their lives. Beyond the confines of their villa, the Hartonos became central figures in a growing awareness campaign across Seminyak and the wider Bali community. Their ordeal highlighted the real dangers posed by obsessive individuals, particularly those who used deception, surveillance, and detailed planning to target unsuspecting families. Adrian collaborated with local law enforcement and neighborhood associations, sharing insights on digital security, personal privacy, and the importance of vigilance in daily routines. He led workshops for expats and locals alike, explaining how social media exposure and predictable patterns could be exploited, and offering practical measures to safeguard homes, information, and personal routines. Natalia focused on psychological safety, offering seminars for parents, children, and educators on recognizing obsessive behaviors, fostering resilience, and teaching children methods of discreet communication and emergency response. Their combined efforts strengthened community awareness and created a culture of mutual vigilance. The legal aftermath of Iwan Prasetyo's conviction also prompted systemic reflection within Indonesian law enforcement and mental health systems. Officers and prosecutors reviewed protocols for domestic intrusions and hostage situations, examining how early warning signs of obsessive behavior could be identified and addressed before escalating into violence. Mental health professionals emphasized early intervention programs for individuals exhibiting obsessional tendencies, while policymakers discussed potential reforms to enhance protection for families and streamline coordination between social services and law enforcement. Iwan's case, marked by meticulous premeditation, extensive monitoring, and delusional motivations, became a case study in both crisis negotiation and the management of obsession-driven crimes. Law enforcement officers cited the incident in training programs, teaching the importance of coordinated tactical planning, precise timing, and the integration of psychological strategies to preserve life. Within the Hartono household, the family gradually reestablished a sense of control and normalcy. Security measures were upgraded, including smart locks, reinforced gates, and discreet alert systems, ensuring that each family member could summon help instantly if danger arose. Daily routines incorporated both structure and flexibility, balancing vigilance with the need to resume ordinary life. Daniel and Sophia returned to school and extracurricular activities with growing confidence, supported by therapists and their parents, who emphasized open communication, emotional expression, and the recognition of lingering trauma symptoms. The children's resilience, cultivated over the tense hours of the intrusion, became a source of pride and hope, demonstrating how preparation, observation, and calmness under pressure could empower individuals even in the most extreme circumstances. Over the next year, the Hartonos extended their advocacy to national platforms, collaborating with nonprofits, schools, and community organizations across Indonesia. They spoke publicly about the dangers of obsession-driven intrusions, the importance of digital and physical security, and strategies for maintaining emotional and psychological safety. Adrian led workshops for business owners, expats, and local communities, highlighting how seemingly minor personal information could be used by obsessive individuals to plan attacks. Natalia participated in forums addressing trauma-informed approaches for children and families, illustrating methods for recovery and resilience following exposure to extreme stress. Daniel and Sophia, with guidance and support, contributed to youth-centered programs, emphasizing communication, situational awareness, and the importance of seeking help when feeling unsafe. Their story, told by those who had lived it, became a powerful educational tool. By 2026, the Hartonos had reclaimed a sense of stability and purpose. Adrian returned to his business with renewed perspective, integrating safety awareness into company policies and community engagement. Natalia expanded her work in educational programs, focusing on mental health awareness and trauma-informed practices for schools. Daniel pursued academics and sports with new focus, while Sophia dedicated herself to music, art, and community volunteering, using her creative outlets to process experiences and contribute positively to society. The family's experience, though marked by terror, became a source of strength, shaping their values and guiding their efforts to help others avoid similar tragedies. Iwan Prasidio remained in prison, serving a life sentence without possibility of parole. His detailed notes, digital records, and obsessive behaviors were cataloged by law enforcement and mental health professionals, serving as a cautionary example of how obsession can escalate into premeditated, violent acts. His conviction reinforced the importance of vigilance, community awareness, and the integration of psychological expertise with law enforcement strategies. The case prompted ongoing dialogue about the balance between mental health intervention, legal accountability, and the protection of vulnerable individuals and families. Ultimately, the Hartonos' story exemplifies the human capacity for resilience, intelligence, and courage under extreme duress. Their survival, guided by observation, patience, and careful strategy, became a testament to the effectiveness of composure and planning in the face of premeditated violence. Their subsequent advocacy transformed trauma into action, educating communities, strengthening laws, and providing hope that even in the darkest circumstances, preparation, courage, and solidarity can save lives. In the annals of modern Indonesian true crime, the 2025 Hartono Villa intrusion stands as both a cautionary tale and a story of survival, demonstrating the profound impact one family's resilience can have on a community, a nation, and the understanding of obsession-driven violence. Story 6. On a humid evening in early August 2025, the bustling city of Petaling Jaya, just outside Kuala Lumpur, was humming with its usual energy. Cars honked along the crowded streets, street vendors called out to attract customers, and the neon glow of shopping malls and restaurants reflected the city's mix of tradition and modernity. Yet behind this facade of daily life, a quiet neighborhood in the Damansara area would become the scene of a crime so meticulously planned and chilling in execution that it would shock Malaysia and capture international attention. This is the story of the Rahman family, a story of terror, survival, and the consequences of obsession, greed, and delusion converging in a single night that would change the lives of 4 innocent people forever. The Rahman family had lived in Petaling Jaya for over a decade, blending traditional Malaysian values with a modern cosmopolitan lifestyle. Aslan Rahman, 47, was a well-respected civil engineer who had overseen multiple infrastructure projects across the Klang Valley. Born in Penang in 1978, he had moved to Kuala Lumpur after completing his studies in civil engineering at the University of Malaya. His work ethic, combined with a reputation for honesty and integrity, earned him both professional respect and a stable life for his family. His wife, Siti Rahman, 45, was a dedicated medical researcher who had spent years contributing to public health studies and community health programs. Together, they cultivated a life of stability, engagement, and care, emphasizing education, community service, and ethical responsibility. The Rahmans had two children, 17-year-old Eamon, a diligent student with a passion for robotics and coding, and 14-year-old Nabila, a creative and sociable girl who excelled in art, music, and debate. The family lived in a modern two-story house in a quiet gated neighborhood, surrounded by similar middle-class homes. Their property, though secure, was accessible enough that routine deliveries and guests could enter without suspicion, reflecting the trust the Rahmans had in their community. They were active members of local associations, participated in school events, and often hosted friends and colleagues, projecting an image of both warmth and respectability. The individual who would target the Rahmans was a man named Hafizuddin Hafiz Khalid, 36, a former acquaintance of Aslan from engineering seminars and networking events. Born in Kuala Lumpur in 1989, Hafiz had shown early intelligence and ambition, but his trajectory took a dark turn following a series of personal and professional failures. Business ventures collapsed, friendships faltered, and his obsession with perceived injustices, particularly toward successful peers like Aslan, intensified. Over the course of months, Hafiz monitored the Rahmans' routines, social media activity, and neighborhood patterns, constructing a detailed understanding of their movements, schedules, and vulnerabilities. His fixation combined envy, delusion, and a compulsive desire to assert power over those he resented, eventually crystallizing into a plan that would culminate in violence. On the evening of August 12th, Hafiz executed his plan. Disguised as a maintenance worker from a local utility company, he arrived at the Rahman residence during the early evening hours. The family, engaged in dinner preparation and household routines, did not question his presence, assuming he was fulfilling a legitimate service call. Hafiz carried with him duct tape, ropes, and a concealed knife, tools intended for restraint and intimidation. He moved swiftly, catching Aslan off guard in the home office and binding his wrists before dragging him into a corner of the room. Sidi, startled by the sudden intrusion, was moved to the living room and restrained while Hafiz kept constant watch, issuing threats and demands. Eamon and Nabila were corralled into separate bedrooms, warned that any disobedience would result in harm, and observed closely as Hafiz alternated between aggression and psychological manipulation. Hours passed in tense, oppressive silence. Hafiz demanded access to bank accounts, digital devices, and valuables, while simultaneously issuing rambling, obsessive monologues about his grievances against Aslan and other individuals he believed had wronged him. Despite the terror, the Rahmans quietly communicated through subtle gestures, silently coordinating movements and memorizing escape opportunities. Aslan noted patterns in Hafiz's pacing and attention, identifying moments when he could subtly adjust his restraints or signal his family. Sidi coached the children in staying calm, observing Hafiz's behaviors, and preparing for any opportunity to escape, emphasizing that survival depended entirely on patience, composure, and vigilance. Outside, a vigilant neighbor noticed the unusual behavior of the supposed maintenance worker, including the prolonged duration of his presence and the unusual configuration of the van parked outside. Police were alerted, and patrol units arrived to observe the property discreetly, coordinating with dispatch and tactical advisors to monitor the situation. Officers quickly established a perimeter and initiated crisis negotiations, using cell phone contact to engage Hafiz while simultaneously assessing potential entry points for a safe breach. The interplay between the family's silent endurance, Hafiz's obsessive attention, and law enforcement preparation created a delicate equilibrium, each second fraught with danger but also opportunity. By 11:30 p.m., subtle lapses in Hafiz's focus began to appear. His compulsive checking of digital devices, obsessively monitoring social media feeds and purported surveillance images, distracted him from the family's movements. Aslan used these brief moments to inch his hands toward freedom, loosening knots and signaling his wife and children to do the same. Nabila, instructed by her mother, remained still yet alert, poised to move at the first cue. The hours of silent coordination and careful observation allowed the family to prepare for a potential extraction, all while Hafiz remained entirely unaware of the progress they were making. As the night deepened over Petaling Jaya, Hafizuddin's obsession began to consume him more visibly. The hours of maintaining control over the Rahman family started to weigh on him, and subtle cracks appeared in his previously calculated behavior. His pacing grew erratic, his muttering increasingly incoherent as he alternated between threats, demands for money and access codes, and long, rambling accusations toward Aslan. Despite this, the Rahman family remained remarkably composed. Aslan carefully observed Hafiz's movements, noting when his attention drifted, and used these brief pauses to slowly work on freeing his hands. Sidi whispered instructions to Ayman and Nabila, teaching them to remain calm, focus on Hafiz's patterns, and prepare for an opportunity to escape or signal authorities. The hours stretched on, each minute an exercise in mental and emotional endurance, with the family silently coordinating under extreme stress. Outside the villa, the Petaling Jaya police had fully secured the perimeter, enlisting tactical units, negotiators, and surveillance teams. Drone feeds provided live visuals of the villa, capturing movement through windows and shadows, while negotiators engaged Hafiz over a phone line. Hafiz, convinced he had the upper hand, was drawn into conversations about imagined slights and conspiracies involving Aslan, which negotiators subtly manipulated to keep his attention away from the family's silent adjustments. Tactical teams studied the property for potential breach points, calculating angles, timing, and the safest path for officers to enter without endangering hostages. Each unit rehearsed scenarios repeatedly, relying on intelligence from negotiators, neighbors, and surveillance to inform a precise intervention plan. By 1:15 a.m., the family had made incremental progress. Aslan had freed one hand completely, allowing him to assist Sidi and quietly guide Ayman and Nabila in loosening their restraints. Every movement was painstakingly slow, coordinated with Hafiz's lapses in attention, and measured against the ambient sounds that could alert him to their activity. Sidi continued to coach the children, reminding them to control breathing, keep silent, and respond only to subtle cues. The combination of observation, patience, and silent communication became the family's lifeline, enabling them to regain a measure of agency even while trapped in a perilous situation. By 2:00 a.m., Hafiz's mental state deteriorated further. He began obsessively checking every door, window, and garden path, convinced the family had been communicating with external agents or surveillance teams. He spent extended periods fixated on a loose gate at the rear of the property, leaving rooms unattended for critical intervals. Observing these patterns, Aslan orchestrated a cautious approach to the rear exit, guiding Sidi and the children to positions that would allow them to follow instructions from law enforcement once the tactical breach began. Negotiators continued their engagement, speaking in calm, measured tones and redirecting Hafiz's obsessive focus toward minor imagined grievances, buying additional time for the family and tactical units. At 2:45 a.m., a decisive opportunity emerged. Hafez left the living area to inspect a suspicious noise outside, completely absorbed in his obsessive checks. Aslan signaled his family to begin inching toward the rear exit, keeping low and moving only during Hafez's extended distraction. Every floorboard creak, every shadow, and every sound was carefully monitored, with family members pausing or retreating at the slightest indication of Hafez's awareness. The outside tactical team, in coordination with negotiators, prepared to breach the villa at the precise moment when Hafez's attention was fully diverted. Timing, observation, and absolute control of fear were critical, and the next few minutes would determine the outcome of a life-or-death situation. By 3:15 a.m., all preparations were finalized. Tactical officers, shields raised and non-lethal tools at the ready, moved into position at multiple points around the villa. The strategy emphasized protecting the family, minimizing risk, and ensuring Hafez could be neutralized without harm to the hostages. Inside the villa, the Ramans were poised at the rear exit, their bodies low, ready to respond to officers' instructions. Hafez, unaware of the full coordination outside, remained focused on the imagined surveillance breaches, providing a narrow but critical window for the operation. The convergence of the family's silent preparation, Hafez's obsessive distraction, and tactical readiness set the stage for the final act of the night, a calculated intervention that would determine the survival of the Raman family. At precisely 3:45 a.m., the tactical team executed the carefully coordinated breach. Officers moved silently but swiftly, shields raised, flashlights sweeping across rooms in synchronized patterns. Hafizuddin, completely absorbed in checking a loose gate and his imagined surveillance feeds, was caught off guard. The element of surprise allowed officers to neutralize him within seconds. He attempted to resist, brandishing the small knife he had concealed, but non-lethal force, including tasers and physical restraint techniques, quickly rendered him incapable of harming anyone. Within moments, Hafez was handcuffed, disarmed, and removed from the immediate area, while the Raman family was ushered to safety. The calm, calculated response of both the family and the tactical team had prevented what could have been a catastrophic escalation of violence. Paramedics immediately attended to the Ramans, checking for minor injuries, signs of shock, and acute stress reactions. Aslan, Sidi, Ayman, and Nabila were physically unharmed, but the psychological toll was evident in their trembling hands, rapid breathing, and tear-streaked faces. Crisis counselors were on hand to provide initial trauma support, offering grounding techniques and reassurance while the family was debriefed. Officers conducted a sweep of the villa to ensure no secondary threats existed and collected the tools Hafez had brought with him, including ropes, duct tape, and the concealed knife, as evidence of premeditated intent. The villa itself bore signs of the obsessive planning and attempted control: doors barricaded, surveillance equipment assembled, and digital devices left on with monitoring software running, all pointing to the meticulous nature of Hafez's intrusion. Forensic teams worked through the night, documenting Hafez's movements, photographing the villa, and retrieving his digital devices, which contained disturbing evidence of his months-long obsession with the Raman family. Spreadsheets, maps of the neighborhood, logs of the family's routines, and screenshots from social media platforms revealed the extent of his planning and fixation. Surveillance from nearby streets and homes corroborated his methods, showing him casing the property under different guises and tracking deliveries and family arrivals over several weeks. The evidence painted a picture of a man whose envy and delusion had escalated into precise, obsessive, and dangerous behavior. In the days following the incident, the story captured national attention. Malaysian media highlighted the courage of the Rahman family, the precision of the police response, and the disturbing psychology of Hafiz. Experts in criminal psychology analyzed the case, noting how obsession, envy, and delusional beliefs could drive a person to meticulously plan a violent intrusion. Public discourse focused on community safety, digital security, and early identification of individuals at risk of escalating to obsession-driven violence. Hafiz's meticulous preparation, including the use of social media and surveillance techniques, raised concerns about how modern technology could enable such crimes and the importance of awareness among families and communities. Legal proceedings began swiftly. Prosecutors relied heavily on the extensive documentation Hafiz had created. The Rahman's testimony and surveillance footage captured both before and during the intrusion. Hafiz's defense argued mental instability and diminished capacity, citing his social isolation, previous business failures, and obsessive tendencies. However, the premeditated nature of the crime, combined with the detailed digital and physical evidence, made it clear that he had full awareness of his actions and their consequences. Witness testimony from the Rahmans provided a chilling account of hours spent under duress, highlighting the psychological control and threats imposed by Hafiz throughout the night. During the trial, Aslan recounted the subtle strategies he employed to maintain calm, observe Hafiz's behavior, and prepare escape opportunities for his family. Sidi described guiding the children through restraint and observation, coaching them in silence, patience, and composure while coordinating subtle movements. Ayman and Nabila, with the support of child psychologists, shared their perspective on remaining calm, following parental guidance, and mentally preparing for the tactical team's intervention. Their testimony was pivotal, demonstrating not only the cruelty and obsession of Hafiz, but also the remarkable resilience and intelligence of the family. After weeks of deliberation, the court reached a verdict. Hafizuddin Khalid was convicted on multiple counts, including premeditated kidnapping, unlawful restraint, assault with a weapon, and attempted robbery. The judge emphasized the meticulous planning, obsessive intent, and the psychological trauma inflicted on the Rahman family. Hafiz was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, reflecting both the severity of his actions and the necessity of protecting the public from individuals capable of obsession-driven violence. The verdict underscored the consequences of premeditated intrusions and became a reference point for future cases involving targeted, obsession-driven crimes in Malaysia. In the aftermath of the terrifying night, the Rahman family began the painstaking journey of recovery. Though physically unharmed, the psychological effects of the intrusion were profound. Aslan and Sidi prioritized both their own emotional healing and that of their children, arranging ongoing therapy sessions with psychologists specializing in trauma from hostage and intrusion situations. These sessions focused on processing fear, rebuilding a sense of safety, and reinforcing trust within the family. Aslan, with his analytical and methodical nature, organized routines and safety protocols, monitoring triggers and teaching the family strategies to manage anxiety. Sidi guided Ayman and Nabila through exercises in grounding, emotional regulation, and controlled breathing, emphasizing that acknowledging fear was not weakness, but a necessary step toward reclaiming control over their lives. As the family stabilized, they became central figures in a growing awareness campaign across Petaling Jaya and the greater Klang Valley. Their ordeal highlighted the dangers posed by obsession-driven intrusions and the importance of vigilance in both physical and digital spaces. Aslan collaborated with local law enforcement and neighborhood associations, sharing insights on security measures, digital safety, and identifying warning signs of obsessive behaviors. He led community workshops for expatriates, families, and residents, emphasizing how predictable routines and social media exposure could make homes vulnerable, and providing practical strategies to mitigate risk. CD focused on psychological safety, offering seminars for parents and children on recognizing obsessive tendencies, coping mechanisms, and effective communication during emergencies. Their advocacy strengthened the community's resilience, creating a culture of mutual support and awareness. The legal aftermath of Hafizuddin Khalid's conviction prompted reflection within Malaysian law enforcement and mental health systems. Officers and prosecutors reviewed protocols for domestic intrusions, hostage situations, and threat assessment. Psychologists advocated for early intervention programs for individuals showing signs of obsessional behavior, while policymakers considered reforms to enhance protections for families and streamline collaboration between social services and law enforcement. Hafiz's case, marked by meticulous planning and obsessive monitoring, became a training case study for both crisis negotiation and the management of obsession-driven crimes. Law enforcement personnel referenced the case in tactical training, emphasizing coordinated action, precise timing, and psychological strategies to preserve life. Within the Rahman household, the family gradually reestablished a sense of control and normalcy. Security upgrades included smart locks, reinforced gates, and discreet alert systems that allowed immediate communication with authorities. Daily routines balanced vigilance with the need to resume ordinary life. Daniel and Sophia, Ayman and Nabila, returned to school, extracurricular activities, and social engagements under careful supervision, and with ongoing therapy support. Their resilience, cultivated over the tense hours of the intrusion, became a source of family pride, illustrating how observation, composure, and careful planning could empower individuals even under extreme duress. Over the following year, the Rahmans expanded their advocacy to national forums, speaking about the dangers of obsession-driven intrusions, the importance of community awareness, and strategies for psychological and physical safety. Aslan presented seminars for businesses, homeowners, and expatriate communities on digital and physical security, while CD addressed educators and parents on trauma-informed approaches for children. Ayman and Nabila contributed to youth-oriented programs, teaching peers situational awareness, communication strategies, and the importance of seeking help when feeling threatened. Their story, told directly by those who lived it, became a powerful educational tool in Malaysia, influencing both public consciousness and practical safety measures. By 2026, the Rahmans had reclaimed stability and purpose. Aslan resumed his engineering work with renewed perspective, integrating safety awareness into business policies and community outreach. CD expanded her involvement in health and education programs, focusing on trauma-informed practices and public safety education. Ayman pursued studies in robotics and cybersecurity with renewed focus, while Nabila explored art, music, and community volunteerism, channeling her experiences into creativity and public service. The family's ordeal, though marked by terror, became a source of strength and guidance, illustrating how resilience and coordinated action could transform trauma into positive impact. Hafizuddin Khalid remained in prison, serving life without parole. His detailed notes, maps, and digital records were studied by law enforcement and mental health professionals, serving as a cautionary example of how obsession can escalate into premeditated violence. His conviction reinforced the importance of vigilance, community awareness, and the integration of psychological expertise with law enforcement strategies, serving as a precedent for handling obsession-driven intrusions in Malaysia. Ultimately, the Rahman family's story exemplifies human resilience, courage, and intelligence under extreme duress. Their survival, achieved through observation, patience, and careful strategy, became a testament to the power of composure and planning in the face of premeditated violence. Their advocacy transformed trauma into action, educating communities, strengthening safety measures, and offering hope that even in the darkest circumstances, preparation, courage, and solidarity can save lives. In Malaysian true crime history, the 2025 Raman Villa intrusion stands as both a cautionary tale and a story of survival, showing how one family's resilience can influence a community, inspire national safety initiatives, and provide a framework for understanding obsession-driven crimes. Thank you for joining me here at Mr. Midnight. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep. And until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious.